All right, I'm going to open up the Zoom room. All right. Welcome everyone to our Zoom webinar today as we dive into 3D art. Awesome. Got people rolling in here. So first things first, if you see your chat box in the Zoom room, make sure when you're sending a message, it says to, and you'll want to change that from just panelists to panelists and attendees. By doing that, you'll make sure that everyone is seeing what you're typing in, all the questions that you have for Mike. We will all see that. Awesome. All right, so we've got people rolling in. We've got almost about 20 people in the room right now. Maybe people can chime into the chat and make sure they say hi. Hello, everyone. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and pass it on over to Patrick here, and he'll get us started. Patrick, I think you're muted.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I got like three different things being used.
You're just teasing people.
I know. Hey everybody, I'm Patrick Kenny. I'm the curriculum lead for the 3D art track at the School of Game Development. I'm just going to be co-hosting in the background this webinar with Michael Pavlovich. I am, incredibly happy and honored to have him here. This has been a months-long process getting the right date scheduled for this event, and I'm glad that we managed to get it to work. And I'm very grateful to Michael for making time to do this for us. With that, I'm going to pass it over to John Yusiak, who is one of our instructors for game asset production, digital sculpting, and 3D modeling. John?
Thank you. Yeah, and same here. Glad Mike can join us today. And if you don't know me, yeah, I do some teaching for the Zbrush classes, some of the game development classes, and yeah, maybe some of you have me. So I just want to give you a little quick rundown of Mike in case you are not familiar. This just be a short story. So it's about 10 years ago, and I was offered to teach a Zbrush class, and they switched versions in the school. So I was used to like version 2.0 or 3, where the interface was completely different, and I had like 1 week to learn the new one. So I don't know, I think it was Gnomon or something. I found, like, I was going through courses and there was nothing interesting, and Mike's stuff stood out. And I grabbed the files, of course, paid for those. And they were probably the best videos I've ever seen. Very thorough. He tells you like how to do so many different things, different ways. And a couple of years ago, I saw him live streaming on YouTube, and it was the same thing. Just always just constant iterations of stuff. Just very clear, easy to follow. And we got talking one day. I was like, hey, do you want to maybe see if you can do a seminar here? So here it is. We got Mike Pavlovich here, and he'll tell you all about himself. And I think that's all I have to say for the moment. But Mike, if you want to take the show.
Right on. Well, thank you, John. It's always, I'll go ahead and share my screen while I'm thinking about it. Share. So hopefully you guys will see all that. It's always nice to see a friendly face. There's always John Yu, and I have to stream early morning, which Central Time, I live in Austin, Texas. So I start my day at 5:30 in the morning, and I'll start live streaming. And so most of my audience is overseas, because certainly nobody in LA is up at that. Well, if they are, they're going to bed after staying up late. And then, but John Yu's always there, always a John Yu there. He's always, ready and willing to chime in and kind of answer some questions if I'm busy doing a demo and stuff.
That's
so
why I
appreciate
work.
that, John. It's super helpful. And it's nice to finally, see your face as opposed to, just being John Yu, behind the chat box there. So
thank you, Mike.
So I'll take you through my history a little bit, and I'll have some resources for you early on. So basically, my background is I graduated. First I graduated from Ringling College of Art and Design in 2005 with the Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Computer Animation. They have a game system now, a game development area now, but back when I was going there, it was just computer animation. I was like more Pixar type stuff, very heavily weighted towards rigging and animation, and it was a little bit like modeling and texturing kind of took a backseat. Just part of the process. You learned it, but you didn't really delve into it. But I found that when I was going through the pipeline, pre-pro and character development and storytelling and, texturing and modeling and then rigging and animating and exporting into video. By the time I got done modeling and texturing, I was bored. I was like, by the time, and I had to go and animate it, and animating was like, it was cool, but it was like pulling teeth with me. And I love seeing great animation, but boy, I was not a great animator. So I found myself gravitating towards the modeling and texturing side and the storytelling side visually from that component. So that's where I ended up. But actually before that, I went to college in Waco, and I'm not that old. Here, full disclosure, I was swore to myself I was going to get plenty of sleep, and I actually had to rely on an afternoon coffee today. So if you see my brain zone out, that would be why. I should be able to make it through though. But I went to college in Waco to get my associate's degree way back in the day. And that was basically a degree in Photoshop at the time. It was like 1999. So I graduated at Ringling 2005. And they're in Sarasota. So I just went up the road to EA Tiburon. And that's where I worked on Madden, NCAA, head coach, and NASCAR. Those were the kind of games that were there. Worked there for a couple of years. And then I went to DC Universe Online at which is now Daybreak Games, but at the time it was Sony Online Entertainment. And that was my first big ZBrush experience. In college, I did use ZBrush here and there, but then I really dove deep into ZBrush when I was working on DC Universe Online. It was very ZBrush-centric pipeline. So when you use ZBrush day in and day out, 10 hours a day, you get pretty good at it, and you get that muscle memory in there. And then as you learn ZBrush, you're able to kind of learn the new stuff and just kind of pile that on. It's a lot easier to stay up to date as opposed to kind of getting stuck in any program, but ZBrush especially, where if you get stuck in like ZBrush 3.5 and you ignore like the next 7 updates, and then you update to ZBrush 2021 and you're like, what just happened? So luckily I'm able to kind of just stay up to date pretty quickly. I'll get the new version, or I might be in on their beta. I'll learn it. I'll do these videos. So if you find yourself needing to catch up, I have my ArtStation page. I have my YouTube channel. The YouTube channel playlist has a little bit more, but the ArtStation page is probably a little bit easier to navigate if you want to catch up on like, hey, what's new in ZBrush 4 R8? Came out 5 years ago, but if you need to go through here, you can click up here, and then there's 61 videos that'll take you through that. And that's for every release of ZBrush since then. So ZBrush 4 R8, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021. As well as if you're just getting started out on ZBrush, or if you want to like, hey, I want to get ramped up again because it's been a while, I'm a little rusty. If you go to this concept and ideation, it's a whole series. Don't worry about that. All you need to worry about is this first 56 videos up here. And that'll kind of get you started from like, hey, what is this document they're talking about? What's a Z tool? Where's my outliner and my objects and my lights? I don't understand this program at all. That would be a great place to start.
I want to ask, so these videos, you just strictly make these for your own, like your people, right?
That's a good question. What ended up happening was when I was at Sony Online Entertainment, they're like, hey, how do I progress to be a junior artist, a senior artist, to advanced senior artist? And they're like, well, to be a senior artist, you're pretty good at ZBrush, so why don't you do some videos? So I was like, okay. And I did internal videos. And the thing about doing internal videos when you're working at a company is the audience is real small, and they may or may not watch it. So when I did that set of internal videos, I ended up doing that for Eat 3D as well, externally. And then that was my first taste of, when I do things internally, nobody really cares. Or if they do, a couple people. But when I do things externally, a lot of people care. And that's not a big deal to me, but I'm like, if I'm going to bother putting in the time and energy, I might as well give it to everybody and influence more people. Not that I'm trying to influence people, but share my knowledge with a broader base and not just do it internally. And luckily I work at Certain Affinity, who's totally cool with that. They actually, they like it when their artists who work at Certain Affinity go external and like say, hey, you know, because it's good for them and it's good for us. So that was my foray into doing external videos. And then that just turned into like, hey, just go to my YouTube channel, and that just keeps me honest. And then I do live stream for content. I really wish, I don't know, maybe one day when I retire, I'll go full time just doing content online, and then, you know, just doing the fun stuff. But for now, it's just a little thing on the side that I do as new releases come out. And it's not just ZBrush. There's Houdini stuff in here if you want to do like a Houdini auto game dev tool set, where you can go through and take this and turn this into an auto game res and bake your maps. You can do that all through the Houdini, and even this a newer one up here, auto game res. So you can have your own character pipeline set up, so you can just run high res files through your 15-minute Houdini graph and export those things out and throw them in the painter. That's all in here, as well as like Fusion 360 is another one I used to use a lot. Substance Painter, Marvelous Designer, Marmoset, all that stuff as other, and Instalod. There's some stuff in there too that's pretty neat. I try to stay heads up development. I try not to. There's a balance you have to do, especially when you're a student. Is like, and when you're in development too, after you graduate and you get your job, is how heads down do I need to be? Because you need to be heads down. You need to get your work done, and you need to, apply technique to make better stuff faster and learn that way. But then also, if you keep your head down too long, or you close your eyes to, hey, we don't use Photoshop anymore for texturing, we use Substance Painter. And if you're like, man, Photoshop for life, forget that. You're in this industry, it changes every 4 years, sometimes 180. So if you keep your head down too long, or you're too resistant to change, or you're too hesitant to, update your skill sets and stuff, boy, you can be, like I said, a dinosaur overnight, or you can find yourself sinking. If you maintain your progress in a flat line, everyone else, their progress is going up. So if you flatline too long, all of a sudden your senior position turns into, how come the people we're hiring out of college are better and faster and know more tools than you do, so you want to kind of avoid that. But it's a balance. You can't just do heads up development all the time and learn all the new stuff and never actually apply it towards anything. So especially when you're a student, you got to learn the stuff and apply it and get a good portfolio going for that type of thing. And it's kind of, speaking of, I do have, for common questions like that, I do have a blog. First one, do I need a college degree? Full disclosure, and I'm talking to college students and stuff, people at a college. I don't really answer this question. I'm not going to be like the boomer parent who's going to be like, what you do to get a job is you walk up to the CEO and you shake his hand and look him in the eye, and he gives you, your job till you retire with your gold watch. I graduated in 2005, and that was after 2 degrees. And I don't know anything about what you're going through or how the job market is. I have an okay idea of what it is. I go to trade shows, and I'm one of the hiring managers at Certain Affinity, but I would be dumb to think that I know exactly what you're going through or exactly what the job market is. So this is basically my experience of when I graduated even for me, when I graduated, after my first degree of 2001, that's ancient. We were exporting still to Betamax video, and putting things on CD, and just DVD burning was kind of new. 1x CD burners to finally 1x DVD burners, and you would send out your reel that way, and that was even before putting your stuff online that much. So this is basically that experience. And then also, like, I get a lot of questions about motivation, inspiration, how you stay motivated, inspired. And really that just is discipline more than anything. It's not so much motivation, inspiration as it is just waking up and doing your work and finding meaning in that. And I'll have probably more to say on that as we progress too. But like, as far as finding meaning in what you're doing, you may find yourself in a position where you're like, I'm just modeling a trash can. What's fun in that? Literally anything you model, anything you're messaging to an audience is about storytelling. So if you can, and Mike Hill does a lot of great videos on this type of subject too, where it's like, if you can encode meaning and you can have storytelling for anything you make, now remember, one, it makes your job a lot funner, and also going to make your work so much better. So if you can get in that mindset of, again, just modeling for an end experience for somebody and what you're trying to message to the external audience, and doing that effectively, that's a lifelong endeavor, and it also makes your job a lot funner. 2D versus 3D, how to break into the games industry. Again, this is one person's opinion. for what it's worth. But it's all there too if you want to, check that out. I can keep going. Is there any pressing questions yet?
Mike, I wouldn't feel bad. Most of the things I sent out were letters and all flat files that I was waiting for, mailed responses. And I collected all of the rejection letters. And when I first got hired, I burned all of the rejection letters.
Yeah, it's so cathartic.
My ritual.
And layered with just meaning. And that's pretty intense, man. That's awesome.
I had a question that might actually pertain to some of the students, especially ones graduating.
Sure.
And this could come later. When you're doing a modeling reel, would you suggest having no animation in it other than a turntable? Because I know students will try to animate their characters, and when you just want to show your modeling.
That's a good point. And so at Certain Affinity, we have an idea of like upstream and downstream departments. So upstream departments would be like art direction and concept art, and then it comes to the modeler and the texture artist, and then the texture artist eventually that'll get handed off, or you'll collaborate closely with the rigging team, the animation team, and the tech art team, and the engine team, engineering, to get your stuff in game. So upstream, more artistic, art director concept, and then downstream is more technical, but like rigging and animation. So if you do have, long story short, if you do have animation abilities, that's good. I don't mind seeing that, because it just tells me that, like, hey, you've animated, you have an idea of how that works. So if you needed to talk to the rigging department downstream from you, it's not going to be an toss it over the wall situation where it's like, hey, I'm a modeler, man, I don't deal with these people, figure it out and you let me know how it goes. It's no, I've actually rigged, I've animated a little bit, I have a feel for that department, I know what they're looking for ish, and I'm able to communicate with those departments. So I would say it's not bad to show. However, I will say when I'm looking at portfolios, I've usually, this might sound bad, but usually when I go to somebody's website, it's almost always, when it's their website and they've built it and they've done their HTML coding and they've got it all organized and stuff, it's almost 100% a worse experience than just putting your stuff in ArtStation. And just because I know ArtStation, I know how it's laid out, I know where I can click on something, and if you have an image, a video turnaround, and maybe a little animation right in a row, I can pick and choose to go watch it. If I get a long demo reel of like, okay, this is a 10-minute Vimeo video, and I have to click through it, that's a little more difficult for me, because I can't go like, hey, I can, if I'm on your ArtStation page, I can go, okay, there's some hard surface stuff, there's some organic stuff, I can click on what I need to click on, and I can go through, if they have videos, I can choose to watch the videos and look at the turnaround, or look at the animation, or look at the still images, and it's all there. And the wireframes too, if it's a hard surface modeling and I want to make sure, like, hey, you can sub-D model and know about creasing and control loops and all the stuff that goes along with that. I can find it, as opposed to a video demo reel where it's like, and it seems like more film people have this than game people. Game people usually just have an ArtStation and it's easy. Film people will sometimes have, here's 15 minutes from Avengers Endgame. Great, man, that's awesome, I love it. But I also know that 7,000 people worked on this shot. What am I looking at? And then even if they do a breakdown, I got to click through it, and then I got to see, okay, here's some hard surface, there's some wires, kind of. I have no still images. I'm not sure, still not exactly sure what they worked on.
What were you responsible for?
Yeah. So I would say, just my 2 cents, ArtStation seems to be the easiest, fastest way. And the other thing too is, when I worked at other schools and stuff too, they would say, hey, you know what, make your own website, and it shows that you can do that, I guess. And it's like, well, for me personally, I don't care too much if you can slog through HTML coding. I'm not going to ask you to. The most I'm going to ask you on your job is to go into Confluence and type some stuff, maybe some documentation in, and hit save, enter, and then maybe drop an image in there. So my personal opinion again would be, your time's better spent just focusing on your portfolio, tailoring it towards the studio you want to work for if you can, making sure you're answering. And it's again, that getting your foot in the industry goes over a lot of this too that I'm talking about. But like, making sure you don't leave a whole lot of questions, and don't put in too much stuff if you're not sure of the quality, but don't then put in too little stuff, because if there's a bunch of questions where I'm like, well, there's only one thing in here, so can they do this, this, and this, and this? If someone else sends me a portfolio where they answer those questions visually, I might not bother following up with the person who didn't. you know, unless it's like a really astounding piece and I want to dig deeper, but don't make me dig deeper, you know.
I know we have other student questions, but maybe this can help them too. Like, what about like when you are trying to get a job, but they require 3 years experience, and then it's just a cat and mouse kind of, you're just chasing the tail. Like, well, I got to get the experience to get the job. And like,
I would say, especially for entry level, it's and even as an artist in this industry, your portfolio is your lifeblood. Like before again, it's going to sound terrible. And here's the other thing too, is everything coming out of my mouth is my opinion. It's not my employer's opinion. It's not the people who work with me opinion. This is literally how I tend to do things. It's not 100%. Depending on the situation, I may deviate from this a bit, but generally speaking, I don't look at your cover letter first. I don't look at your resume first. If you're coming in as an entry level. Now, if you're coming in as a senior artist or a lead artist or a director, absolutely, you know, I'm going to eyeball all that stuff for sure. Entry level, I go straight to your portfolio because that's really what I want to see. I already know what your resume is pretty much going to look like. And that's not to say I won't ever look at your resume. I won't ever look at your cover letter. So that's not the first thing I look at. So even if it says, hey, 3 years experience, I would say if you have good, compelling work that's tailored to the company you want to work for, and you can compete with the kind of the level of the work that's going on there. If you look up the people that work there and you're like, hey, Michael Pavlovich, well, maybe not me, but like, you know, who works at Certain Affinity, who does the type of modeling you would want to do, look at their ArtStation page. Now, that's not to say some people maintain their ArtStation pages more than others. And for an artist, it can be a little scary if you don't maintain your portfolio. I use ArtStation and portfolio interchangeably, but you know, they may be a little bit dated, but if you're at a semi-competitive level with that and you don't quite have the 3 years experience isn't necessarily everything for entry level. It's if you can show that I can do the type of modeling, I'm just using modeling as an example, it could be any department, concept, animation. I can do the type of work that you're probably going to require. So for modeling, it's, hey, I can look at a concept, I can execute on that concept, I can do decent UVs and bake those maps, and I can throw it into Unreal 4 or Unity or Marmoset. You know, you have a pretty decent pipeline breadth of knowledge and it looks pretty good. You know, you were able to take that concept and nail it. And if you're really good, you can actually elevate that concept to the next level. But again, if you're just starting out, maybe, you know, hitting the concept or approaching the concept is probably as good as it's going to get. But even just doing that tells me you can take direction because you're able to take a concept and you're able to interpret that concept into 3D, which can be difficult depending on the concept. You're able to take it all the way through the pipeline. You don't have to stop and be like, well, I'm kind of a pigeonholed certain type of modeler and this is where I stop and everyone and someone else has to take it the rest of the way for me. I can do it. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be the best in the world, but even just showing me, hey, you got some decent UVs, you got a decent game res, you baked the maps, look good enough, you threw it into Substance Painter, you textured it up. And just like anything else, I'm gonna talk a lot about storytelling. It's when you go to texture an object, it's not just do as I say, not as I do, because I'm the worst when it comes to like smart material, drop, material ID, drop, where, slide, ship it. Don't do that. Use that to get you faster, but also go through there and tell a story. If you do a weapon and you actually put like little oil marks around where a weapon is oiled, you're able to put little scrapes and wear and thumbprints where that stuff is used appropriately. That tells me so much more about your storytelling ability as an artist. And that goes for modeling, animation, concepts. You have to message visually. You have to communicate visually. It's the whole medium is communicating visually with an audience. And when you're doing a game, you have to communicate well. You have to communicate big. It's got to be a big read because it's going to be 6 inches on your screen running around. You're going to be shooting at it. So just making sure you can visually storytell and you're not oblivious to that. And you're thinking about that already puts you in another level. And another thing, do as I say, not as I do. Presentation's important. I'm the worst at that. I'll be the first to admit, like I'll spend, so I teach it also at CGMA, CG Master Academy. I do an online course and it's a 6-week course, ZBrush course. And I did this character as part of that 6-week process. So as they were going through it, I was going through it with them. So I would do like, so this character took me about 6 weeks. I mean, if I was sitting down doing 9 to 5, it'd be a lot faster, but, going through it with them, you start with your block out and then you get a little bit more refined and then you start ideating your ideas making sure it all works, and then go through there and start just building stuff out and refining as you go. And then eventually you game res it, and you do the maps and stuff. So after all this, you know, you go into Substance Painter, and again, you're doing that. Let me turn off the audio here. You know, you're doing that storytelling, you're putting the where it needs to go. If you're going to bother putting on painted stuff, and, you know, you want to make sure it's scraped off appropriately, or even the, you know, little warning signs, these are all in Italian for some reason, I forget why. But yeah, putting on, just kind of telling that story with the object. And again, I'm not the greatest at that. I have material and texture teams that are way better than I am, but I dabble. But, you know, so I go through this entire process, and my end result is, for presentation, front 3/4 A pose. Is it the worst thing in the world? No. Could it certainly be presented better than me just putting the front 3/4 A pose into iRay, letting it sit for a minute, and then saying, okay, we're done here. Ideally, again, your presentation is part of your storytelling. What about this lighting speaks to this character? Well, nothing. He's lit by a light. Congratulations, Mike. You've told the story of an asset sitting in a void with a light on him. So if there's any way you could put him in an environment, that's extra points. And if you could give him lighting that is good for that type of environment, or backplate image that really speaks towards what this character's going through, or what kind of world he lives in, you know, you try to tell that with the object too. But if you can present that, and hell, even more so than that, if you take the time to actually go through and maybe pose it and set the camera there and think about what that camera angle and that pose says about his messages about that asset, even better, you know. So part of that polish and part of that presentation is also important. It's not just, ideally, it's not just, hey, I can execute on an asset. That's a lot of it. I'll be honest, especially entry level. If you can do that, that's probably 90%. If you can also give me that extra 10% of presentation, you're going to be better than the person who just gave me the 90% of execution, you know. But also, just execution can probably get your foot in the door. So I don't want you to burn you out on like, oh, I did all this presentation stuff, but I kind of skimped on execution. Don't skimp on execution. But if polishing and kind of getting it all over the finish line is also not going to tax you too heavily, I might wait. I might weight it a little bit towards the polish side too, if you can.
Hey, Mike. We have a couple questions coming in.
Sure.
Some have to do with ZBrush stuff, like once you got started get going. But one, Devin Boyce asked, how long would this take you in a 9 to 5? And don't worry, everybody, we'll get to everybody else.
Actually,
that was just really relevant at that moment.
Yeah, let me load him up so I can kind of walk through.
And then, yeah, there's a couple cool questions here we'll have to get to. Don't worry, everybody, we'll get to you.
Yeah. I just recently did a cleanup on my file folders. So, I mean, if you guys are hardware heads, kind of a non sequitur here almost, but if you guys do hardware stuff, I dabble quite a little bit in the hardware side of things too. So I get new machines every once in a while. I got my Threadripper system set up, and I got my new NVMe M.2 drive, and I went through and did some cleanups, and now I can't find anything. Oh, there he is. Jeez, sorry about that. And I also wasn't necessarily planning on going to this guy, but since we're talking about him, body, you find body.
Yeah, then there's some on YouTube too, question about job stuff.
Yeah, for sure, man. So basically, to knock this type of character out 9 to 5, again, if it's up to me, super fast. Like if I don't have to deal with an art director and a concept artist telling me what to do, boy, world is my oyster. Now, however, that can also slow you down if you're like, well, what's cool? Well, sometimes for me, that's the majority of the time spent is going, what the hell am I making? Like, it's one thing to be like, I'm just gonna make some cool stuff and you're gonna answer all the questions, and it just kind of everything falls into place. But it's another thing where if you get into the you start going like, well, I'm just going to start putting stuff here, and then you make a bunch of stuff and then you delete it all because it ends up not quite working out like you thought. So sometimes it is a lot easier to work from a concept. So this guy wasn't necessarily from a concept. It was basically just throw up a bunch of reference and just have at it. So in that case, if that's all I really need to worry about, probably a good, like 9 to 5, a good 2 weeks to kind of just go through and just kind of do all the block out stuff, make sure everything's working, and then go through and refine it all, make sure everything. The other thing too is if I had to make this thing functional, like, hey, I have to go back and forth with the animation team and make sure this thing animates correctly and ADS is okay for the game view, the first person view, that would certainly up my time. But if it's just a little prop on his arm, it's not a huge deal. So I would say a good solid 2 weeks to do the high res, and then a good solid probably week and a half to do the game res, bake out the maps, pump it through Painter, and throw it into Engine. Again, with the caveat that I'm not doing a lot of back and forth upstream, and I'm doing 0 back and forth downstream. So let's say like a good 3 or 4 weeks, maybe a good month to put something like this together. He's a little more complex than most of my characters. And again, you also have to depending on the end result of the characters, how much time you're going to put in. So if it's a fighting game with 2 characters on screen, you have 225,000 polygons per character. You can IMAX right up to their nostrils and see all the stuff in detail. Sure, a character's going to take you a little bit longer to finesse. If it's a top-down 3/4 game back view with no character create and it's on a mobile screen, oh my God, please don't spend a month on a character. It's more important to get the content that reads as appropriately as opposed to going in here and being like, well, let's tell the story of what's going on underneath this thing. That's another thing I did too, is like I had maybe delusions of grandeur is one way to put it. But as I'm building this up, I'm also thinking like, oh, do I want to do variants of this guy where maybe he doesn't have all this stuff on, to do a little bit more of that storytelling. So as I'm building him up, I'm not just doing it for the view, which you can sometimes cut some corners with, where it's like, oh, I don't need to really worry about what's going on underneath this shawl or whatever that thing is because you're never going to see under there. Well, if you're not sure of that, then you're probably going to overwork some areas. And that's what I did all over this guy. So, but yeah. And even then, I didn't even bother going into the hair stuff or XGen or anything like that, or rendering this in V-Ray or Arnold or anything like that, or doing like a cinematic style model. It's just quick and dirty stuff. But I think I answered that question ish.
Awesome. Should I run through the list of questions then?
Sure. That's yeah.
I'll start from, well, the YouTube shorter. I'll go on there. What are the top programs most employers look for when it comes to hiring character models? Can ZBrush, Maya, Photoshop, and Mudbox and After Effects still cut it in the industry? Or are Keyshot, Substance Painter, Nuke, Unity, etc. now pretty much mandatory? That was all one thing.
I would say for the gaming industry, Keyshot's probably the lowest on the list. Keyshot's great for me to kind of very quickly, in fact, I can maybe load up Keyshot here. So if I want to just kind of throw something into Keyshot real fast, just for presentation purposes, let's load this up here. Just to do a quick turnaround or maybe get sign off, do a little smoke and mirrors for the art director. That's what I'll use Keyshot for. But as far as like, I don't have to worry about UVs, don't have to worry about any of that stuff. This is a, I don't know if you guys watch Regular Show, but it's one of the characters from Regular Show. But I can very quickly go through and just be like, hey, and again, this guy took me a day. So, and if you want to see the making of process of that, I do have that. I did a live stream of kind of his setup, but basically you can kind of walk through. And again, this is 100% ZBrush, go through and do his shirt and do his pants and extrude those, and then do the cloth simulation for the pants and the jeans and stuff like that. And, I insert curve brushes and fiber mesh and all that stuff. So again, 100% ZBrush, throw it into Keyshot, and in a day I'll have the guy done, ready to go. So when you're doing, especially when you're doing previs, like as a character artist, and when I say character artist, I kind of stop myself a little bit because at Certain Affinity, we have a sandbox art team. That is weapons, vehicles, mechs, characters, creatures, flora and fauna. Anything that gets a bone and goes in the engine is what we take care of for the team. Now, that doesn't mean that every character artist, sandbox artist has to be able to do all that. But we do try to have a little bit more breadth than just like a specialized person, like, oh, I only do creatures and that's it. Or I only do weapons and that's it. If you do weapons, hopefully you can also maybe do some equipment and also maybe do some vehicles, but I probably wouldn't ask you to do a whole lot of creatures. Now, we do have some people at Certain Affinity for sure that can do it all. They can throw down on creatures, they can throw down on weapons. We do have those unicorns. But as far as like what you would need as a sandbox artist, we don't really discriminate on the modeling side. So if you can, and that's the other thing too, is like, I use ZBrush a lot for even just ideation. So if I want to do a hard surface thing, let's go ahead and let me cancel out of this real quick, just so I'm not going to bog down. Actually, one thing I do need to do really quickly, preferences, quick save, duration.
And while you're doing that, some students have in ZBrush questions, so maybe you can answer as you're moving along, but with about Booleans and stuff. But Dustin asked, what is your preferred hair pipeline for in-engine characters? And that would be for more realistic hair. Sorry, I just figured since
Totally. Yeah, I'll actually pull up an image for that. Oh boy. Security is good. Authentication is good, but it's also kind of a pain in my butt sometimes. There we go. So this is something you can do with hair, and this is something I like to do with hair. Instead of like trying to comb something into place, what I usually like to do is use geometry to control the flow of the hair. Especially important if I'm going to do something that's like this, that is, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit, that's a little bit more, like if you tried to get me to make like fiber mesh weave hair together in a pattern like this Celtic knot, oh boy, I quit, no thanks. However, really all you have to do is if you can just take 2 seconds to pull out a hair knot. And in fact, I can, let's just, so here's a little hard surface example we can go in a second as far as ideation and stuff and getting your ideas out before you go hard surface crazy. But just really quickly, I can show you. So I'm going to go into my comma key here. Well, first we'll drag out something to use it with. I'm going to go into my brushes here, and you can go to like the ZBrush repository or even ArtStation. Everybody's making a Gumroad. Everybody's got their own brushes here. So for example, one hairbrush you can do if you want to, do hair with a braid, you can just drag out a braid here. Let's go say split mask points. And the way this is set up isn't great, but you can always go in here, zero mesh half decimal down to 0. And then let's do a quick auto group. So as long as you have, when you're doing hair, if you have a starting point and an ending point, so if I go through here and say polygroup, polyloop here and here, and it's like, okay, this one root to tip, you can tell your hair program, follow this line on the geometry with a curve or a spline or whatever that program uses that you use, XGen and Maya or something. Follow this geometry. And in fact, this one was Geo to Maya Hair as a plugin. I mean, this is old, so don't get me wrong. This isn't necessarily how I do hair necessarily now, but I haven't done hair since then. So again, I'm becoming a little bit dinosaur-y here. But the same thing holds true is basically I would go in here with the geometry, root to tip. I would then pass hair splines in whatever program you're using to go, hey, just follow it root to tip. And next thing you know, in 5 seconds, I mean, you saw how fast it was for me, to make this hair strand. Hell, even in ZBrush, I can take this, let's do this, and let's say split hidden here. So if I have this, say delete hidden, we can go in here, same idea, stroke, curve. Let's go ahead and say frame our polygroups border, then go in here to BI, brush, insert, whatever. And then you can put something right along that curve. And then in this instance, you would be putting a curve or a spline along there to make your hair. But even in here, you can see, okay, I have a root, I have a tip, go through here, and then you just have your splines, and then you have cinematic hair. Or in the program too, you can also go in here and say, okay, I have a root to a tip. Give me hair cards. Give me more hair cards that go root to tip. And then you just have a bunch of hair cards you can then take through here and add more splines and do that. Or you can bake these textures to those hair cards and end up with the same result that's a little bit more performant in a game engine. So that's how I do complex hair. But if I'm just starting out with like, okay, how would I really do hair just kind of starting out here? I would probably go in here to just really quickly. Very first thing I would do, turn off X symmetry, go into my clay buildup brush and go, what is this hair going to look like? Block it out first. And then you can put geometry along these paths. In fact, even on I want to say my YouTube channel here, should be stuff on this too. Where it's like, hey, here's how you control curves to get even stylized hair or hyper-realistic hair to follow along a path, mostly stylistic hair. If you want to do hyper-realistic hair, that would be me maybe using splines or curves or something like this. But this will at least get you like, okay, where's the hair part? Which way is the hair going to flow? Where's the volume of the hair going to be? And then I'm good to go. And now I can make good informed decisions. So I would still use ZBrush to block out my hair, even if I end up going into another program to like do a hair cap or do hair cards and stuff like that. As far as the other question, was that one? Oh, that was like, what programs do you use? So even if I'm going to do like a hard surface, let's turn everything else back on here, like a hard surface model. And it's like, okay, this is just a concept model. This is something that would take me a couple days to do. And in fact, that can kind of lead me into this here. So if we go back to my ArtStation page, if you want more resources on like kind of our workflows and how we ideate Certain Affinity, I did a Zbrush Summit 2018 presentation, and then I've also got a video. So here's like it was me and a group of guys at Certain Affinity kind of put this cinematic together in Unreal, where we just kind of threw this together. And so I did, a guy named Tony Reynolds did the skin and hair, and then I did the clothing on her, and then all the weapons, and then Dave Ansira and JP Eaton did the environment, and then we had Dan Rubel and Jason Barnage do the rigging and animation, and then I did the mech as well, and then Christian Gallego went in and textured a bunch of stuff. Again, that storytelling type thing, and I can load up some of this stuff too. But didn't
this just take a week?
Yeah, this was a very super fast process. Like it was literally like, hey man, and I can show you this model too. This mech was 100% in ZBrush. All the weapons are just concept models. She's basically a concept model, minus her skin and hair. I can show you her kind of setup too, but like all of even the mech is a concept model. I didn't really spend a tremendous amount of time putting that together. You can kind of see the models here and stuff, and I can pull them up in ZBrush too. But when we get to like this weapon, it looks pretty done, right? In the ZBrush presentation, what I talk about is what we call grandma, or the grandma test. So if your grandma was to go by your desk and be like, oh, that looks pretty good. Good job, son. Then that's basically like, does it message well to the end user? Even if you only spent, it's a little bit of animation ideation here, but even if you only spend a couple minutes making something like this, is literally a couple minutes, you paint and then you extrude it and then you throw it in Engine. It still gives you volume. It gives you color and texture information. It gets it in Engine. You can evaluate it. Or if you want to spend a day or two to kind of flesh out the weapons, all of these weapons that you see in here are basically, this one was a little bit more complex, had a little bit more back and forth with the animation team. So maybe it took four days or something like that. But it's still textured, but all of this stuff is just concept meshes. And however you arrive at that, if you're more comfortable doing Maya, Max, Modo, or Fusion 360, I'm comfortable in ZBrush. So it just, a couple, this was actually, if you want to make this weapon, it's up on my YouTube channel as well. But like this kind of thing, all of these things are just a couple days to get into Engine, fully textured with, to run it through Substance Painter. You can also test like, we're just talking like decimate, auto UV, store it into Painter, put it in Engine, but you can still get a feel for like, hey, the volume, the animation, the materials, the lighting, the colors, as well as, hey, that's a 50,000 polygon weapon. Is that going to work? Technically, we'll clean it up a little bit. It'll look a little bit better, but that's basically what you're going to get in a month when this thing is fully done for real. You can start answering those questions early, and animation as well. So like this stuff here, get it in, get some effects on it, and yeah. And so it'll go ahead. And that's another thing I go into here as well is, I do a little bit of animation. So another good complementary skill is, can you go through and while you're doing hard surface modeling, can you throw a rudimentary hierarchy rig on there and kind of rotate things around and make sure that if this thing needs to pop open, it's not going to immediately clunk on something, or if it needs to fly open or it needs to fire or something it needs to recoil, is it going to be able to do that? Or did you just spend a lot of time modeling something that's going to be handed off to another department? They're going to go, hey, back to the drawing board. That's a very expensive upstream step. If you get it to the animators, fully textured, beautifully UV'd, and blood, sweat, and tears went into it, and then you give it to the animators, and they're like, well, first of all, none of this stuff's going to animate, and the designers get it in the Engine, and they're like, oh, that looks like crap from the first person view. You never want to be in that situation, because number one, your morale is going to drop to the floor because blood, sweat, and tears went into that weapon, right? And it looked great from the front three-quarter view you were evaluating at, or the side view you were evaluating at the whole time. But when's the last time you saw a side view of a weapon in game that wasn't in like a little UI icon? What you see in Engine is aim down sights, and from the third person view, usually, or maybe character create, or if you can spin the weapon around in the front end or something like that, maybe. But always trying to keep in mind how things are going to be viewed and stuff like that. And there's also a 96 video where I basically went through this entire presentation and just did a deep, semi-medium dive on all the techniques I was talking about in the video. So if you really want to get bored, and if you're not already bored listening to my voice after this, there's some more of my voice you can listen to. But long story short, I use ZBrush for ideation. I use ZBrush for getting my idea in the round. And then, if I can throw this together in a couple days and then go, okay, how do I really want to make this? Well, if this is just going to be baked out to a 1024 top 3/4 back view, I'm done. Why would I go in here and sub-D model this entire thing if it's just going to be baked out and not really seen from up close? If this is going to be for, you're going to send this to Weta or something, and it needs to be like on a 4K or 8K screen right here, well, you may have to go through and rebuild those, and use UDIMs and all that stuff for the crazy texturing you might be doing. So, but at least the idea is out there, and you got to that point quickly and you're able to get it signed off on. And now I can make all the decisions in the world, going, you know what, this stuff I can rebuild, this stuff I can leave alone. How I'm going to rebuild this is with sub-Ds. How I'm going to rebuild this is with whatever, Fusion 360 or something. So I can kind of take a quick look through here. Marvelous Designer is very industry standard. ZBrush is industry standard, maybe not so much for like vehicles, but if you're ideating and you can do quick ideation in ZBrush and then hop into, again, Maya Max Moto Blender to do the real model, and it makes it faster for you to ideate in ZBrush. ZBrush is still industry standard as far as I'm concerned. There's other industries who use ZBrush for a lot of stuff like that. But ZBrush, Marvelous Designer, Keyshot, if you want quick and easy presentation and sign off, anything you can do to throw some smoke and mirrors at some departments helps a little bit. Substance Painter, Substance Designer, Maya's been the backbone that my entire school and then career, every single project I've worked on has had a Maya backbone, mostly because they're animation pipeline tools. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily anybody's going to care what you use to model it. At Certain Affinity, we don't. So again, Maya Max Moto, Blender, Fusion 360, ZBrush, whatever. But eventually it will have to go through Maya, low res, into engine to the animators. So you need to know a little bit of Maya, but you don't necessarily have to model everything in Maya. Like I keep saying, Fusion 360 for a lot of hard surface stuff. I do have a little bit on that. So if you want to kind of a quick start to Fusion 360, as well as like, hey, can I use Fusion 360 as well as ZBrush? You can actually go back and forth, and I used to do that all the time. So in video 12 here's the basics intro to Fusion 360, and then here, working with imported objects, you can start in Fusion 360, take it into ZBrush, or start in ZBrush, figure out what kind of weird little mechanical thing you need to make, export that, throw it into Fusion 360, and then build it using CAD to get it really, really finessed. But again, ideating quickly in ZBrush, if that's your thing. Houdini, maybe not. I like to dabble, so I do a little bit of Houdini, but if you're a tech artist or technically minded, especially on the environment art side, Houdini's making some big splashes on proceduralism, getting things made even in engine. That you've probably seen those videos by now, where it's like, I can make an entire universe in Houdini and pull some sliders and drag some curves and change the terrain, and it just auto populates. And then you can even do hotspots and AI pathing within Houdini, and you can make an entire game in Houdini run on procedural settings and stuff like that. So keep an eyeball on that one. And then Marmoset, we usually almost exclusively use Marmoset for baking. Just easy and quick and non-destructive.
Cool. Actually, while you're on the hard surface, someone said, so for the hard surface like the mech, do you focus a lot on how the joints work mechanically for the animator, which you kind of just answered that. And then what role do you think Houdini will play in character art in 5 years?
It's interesting. So, well, the thing is like, if I'm just kind of just being cutesy with technique, I may or may not put a whole lot of thought or effort into, okay, does this joint turn? Do I want him to be able to turn and spin his arm? And so I did a little bit. I did I'll be honest, the bare minimum. Like if he raised his arm right now, I don't know that this could totally work depending on the pose he's going to pull. But again, this is just more of a cutesy technique thing. But as far as like the role Houdini, or even programs like Houdini, it's interesting. And I have done a little bit of future talk. So I did a GDC 2015 where and this was so back in my day. So I kind of started. So that helmet right there is that Dido helmet. I made that for Teddy Dido, just to kind of show off Dido, and so I handed that off to him, and then that was kind of the Dido helmet for a while. But that's where I started out, and then we got into Substance Painter, Substance Designer, and this is like a little bit of Halo talk, making Halo PBR. This was back when PBR was like brand new. This is actually back before really anybody was using Substance Designer. I very early Substance Designer pipeline, and this is actually before Substance Painter even existed. So our entire PBR pipeline was just going through Substance Designer and making everything nice and consistent, material libraries, baking stuff out consistently, having a very small team be able to do a lot of very good, consistent work just based on our Substance Designer setup. So nowadays it's like, well, yeah, of course. But back then it wasn't so no duh. And then also kind of comparing that to the Photoshop pipelines, which are like, oh, so gross. But again, that's what we used to have to do. And then this gets very heady through here. I talk a lot about, this is kind of the process I was talking about too, where you do, this quick sketch right here, maybe take you 4 hours maximum. You get in there, you just kind of block it out. And you're like, okay, looks good enough. Dude, decimate it down. Throw some UVs on it, do a quick painter pass, hand it off to the animators. They can get that in game. This will tell you so much information. If you need to go through and refine it based on that feedback, great. Form refine. If you want to rebuild the whole thing in sub-Ds, knock yourself out. But the difference between, say this one and this one is negligible in Engine. So when you're going through there and you're like, okay, does this work? Well, put the sketch in. Does it work? Yeah, it works. Okay, here's some feedback. Okay, we did a form refine pass. It's already in Engine. So here's just a couple of difference of like, here's the sketch, here's the final, here's what changes. What's the difference between those? Concept and production. And then like also I get into like, it's always funny, the Skynet conversation about, machine learning and AI. I could see maybe in our lifetime where you just basically tell Skynet what kind of game you want and what kind of characters you'd like to see. And they could probably do it. And it's one thing to be like, we always like to, you're never going to get rid of artists. And I would say, yes, get like a scan data. Scan data is never going to get rid of all the artists because I can't go out and scan I can't scan Call of Duty stuff. I can't go out and scan Halo for, Halo stuff right here. I can't go to the Halo store and scan Spartan Armor variants. So you got to make it. And that's the same for us. So many games out there. Now, if you're doing a hyper real game, sure, go for it, go nuts. But there's always going to be stuff you're going to want to make for the experience, or even stuff that used to exist. Like if you want to put on your VR headset or your AR headset and go see the ruins and then have it built around you and populated, or if you want to do forensics, rebuild crime scenes and walk through those, and they've been, you need to go and recreate that ancient stuff or that type of thing. You got to build it, so you can't go through and scan it. However, even scanning humans, that only gets you so far, but it gets you pretty damn far if you want to do super hyper real. And then you get into like, well, if you want to make characters with character and stuff, everything really is a series. Everything that an artist, all the decisions we make are a series of operations. Now we're complex beings, and we like to think we're really smart, and artists make all these complex decisions. We really don't, kind of. So if something is smart enough to go through our decision-making process of what's 70-30 breakup, what is appealing, what's fun for characters, what's fun for players, what's fun about the design, what kind of design do you want? Do you want to use a slider to go from sci-fi to ancient history, or down here to steampunk, or up here to 50s, futuristic nuclear holocaust, whatever? You pull a slider, it knows what the rule set is, because those rule sets are fairly determined by human beings. And if an artist can come up with a rule set and follow them, so can other things, believe it or not. And so that's the thing too, where I get kind of a little bit into like, well, if you can say already right now, go on YouTube and look up like Houdini map levels or something like that, you can already make a door. Again, it could be based on, oh, these are the assets I'm getting it, so it's not really procedural. Eventually it'll be smart enough to be able to make a door of any kind. If I tell it to make a hospital, probably it could figure it out. And if I dial in like, well, this is in a poor area of the neighborhood, and it's has a maternity ward and a cafeteria, it can go through and, using intrinsic and extrinsic information, just figure it out. Well, the bathrooms have to go here because it makes sense, and the character has to enter the front door because that's how buildings work. It's all a structure. It's all a framework. So I think within our lifetime, we will probably see this stuff pretty for sure. Like, hey, make me a level. and I want this kind of level. I want to have this type of gameplay, and I want to this kind of sci-fi, and it'll be able to do it. And I want it dirty, or I want it clean, or I want it swampy, or I want it, it's all there. And then eventually, I mean, maybe not in our lifetime, but I could see a world where, I'm not going to be one of those people who was like, germ theory, bah humbug, because you read about those people, and smart people said that, like, germ theory is load of nonsense. Why would anybody even think that? And then of course you look back on those people and you're like, what an idiot, of course germs exist. Well, I'm always careful about being like, you'll never replace an artist. Well, maybe. We'll see. But I think we've got a long ways to get there, and there's so many cool things we can do in the meantime to do this kind of stuff. Like, these are the kind of cool things we can get into.
You ever wonder, like, in 100 years, every asset can be built where they can just grab from a big library, and like, we don't need you anymore. We can just grab this model.
It exists.
Like, everything in the world is modeled somewhere.
Yeah, even yeah, exactly. So again, it's going to be a long time. I wouldn't necessarily put that on your back burner to lose sleep over or anything like that, but always interesting to think about.
While we're on, could you answer, like, what do you think of the hand-painted textures? Is it relevant today? And because we have a lot of hand-painted texture classes, so what do you think about hand-painted textures? I know Blizzard does that, right?
Tell you what I use. There's this guy called So Much Monsters who makes so much materials, and you know what? Let's just go to the YouTube channel. So you can, let's just say here, and this is kind of ties into that procedural thing I was talking about, where it's like, hey, you can go through here and just go and tell it parameters. What do you here's your reference over here open. So you can, let me see if I can move this so I can click through here. You can go through here, and what painterly style do you want? Do you want big fat brush strokes, or do you want nice fine gradients? How big do those how much saturation do you want? What type of material do you want baked into your diffuse? And there's two versions of this. There's the one that has all the information baked in. So everything you see here is painted. So everything is like, oh, it has a highlight on it. It's fake. It looks like a highlight, but just like if it's just being pulled through the diffuse and it's painterly, that's all baked into the diffuse. And you can use lighting to bake to your diffuse. So you don't have to go in there and be like, hey, where's that highlight go? You can shine a light on something, bake that into information into the object, and there's your lighting. So you don't have to figure it out. Now, is that to say, don't learn, like, same thing with anatomy or anything where it's like, well, I know 3D. Do I need to learn how to draw? Well, you should, it's good. And I wouldn't say give one credence over the other. If you're a 3D artist, I would say focus on 3D, but always have that drawing in your back pocket, and it's fun to do. And you can use 3D to help you learn how to draw, and you can use drawing to help you learn how to do better 3D in design. So it's this type of thing. But here, again, just pulling sliders around, you can turn like, oh, here's a gem emerald baked in the diffuse. Here's some gold baked in the diffuse. So it's gradient. Now, is it painterly? Yes or no. And you can dial in parameters to say, hey, give me more brush strokes, and give me more brush strokes to follow the form or don't follow the form. And you can also mix that with actually just going through there and painting, so if you want to start with, Photoshop, or you want to bake out your lighting first and then hop into Photoshop and do a little bit of painting and then throw it into Painter and just kind of finish it out there, you can. So no one's going to stop you from doing both, for sure. There's good things to be said for both. But when you're talking about content creation and really getting content done quickly, man, it's hard to beat, a substance painter start that'll get you. And that's the kind of thing with proceduralism too, is like, well, proceduralism can't do it all. Can it do it 100%? Maybe not. Can it do it to like 60% or 80% or even 40%? If it can get you to 40% in 5 seconds, and it would take you 2 days to get to 40%, that's a win in my book. And if it can get you 80% there, then you can spend more of your time polishing and really messaging appropriately, and not just being like, okay, it took me 3 days to get here. I'm already a day overdue, so I'm not going to have any time to polish. Just get it into game and you ship a subpar product. Dude, take the 80% button. Who wouldn't? You're going to be competing with people that are taking the 80% button. Might as well learn how to use that 80% button. It's only going to make you more competitive and marketable, I suppose.
That's awesome. Do you have links to what you're showing, or?
Sure. Let me.
Possibly.
You know what? I should probably be Yeah, let me explode the. So I don't have access to YouTube chat, but I can definitely do that on the Zoom chat.
The Zoom chat, there's more questions. The YouTube one, I
Hey,
think
John.
I have over. What's up?
I just wanted to ask Michael a question that sort of dovetailed into what he was just talking about, especially as an educator. One of the biggest sort of balances that we try to strike is, you know, exactly what you were talking about. It's the development of these skills and then recognizing that there are tools that have come along that have accelerated this process, you know, incredibly fast. And I just wanted to sort of maybe reflect it back to your own personal development as an artist, is that, you know, you didn't have these things. None of us had these things starting out. And how much value do you put on, you know, being able to work on some of these things in terms of like ideation, in terms of drawing, painting, sculpting without all of these things, and then having those accelerators, those tools. I mean, to one of the biggest things I run into is to simply give these to a student who doesn't have any of that foundation, to think that that's going to produce good art.
Great point. So let me dive into that a little bit. And then I can speak a little bit from personal experience too. And this is going to hurt me a little bit, but I'm very, and this is something I've chosen to do to my detriment, I think, is that I've been very technique focused. I've been very pipeline focused. I've been very workflow focused to my detriment. I can go on I can go on a live stream and I can make something real fast. The problem is if you're all technique based and you're all tools based, you're going to make a lot of garbage really fast. Is that valuable? Or do you have somebody who doesn't know all the tools and doesn't have all the technique in the world, but they can take a ball of clay, or even in ZBrush, in a Dynamesh ball of clay, use a clay buildup brush, the move brush, and make a masterpiece. Even if they're slow, they'll still get there. Whereas me, who's very fast in technique, and I could probably think of 1,000 ways you're doing it wrong, or you could do it better. I won't ever get to that masterpiece. So which one's more valuable? And even if we're talking about production speed, I can make something very fast at less quality because I'm going to hit my peak. I mean, if I'm executing on a concept, then I can, you know, I'm learning as I go for sure. But the person who's slower but has a better fundamental understanding of aesthetics, design, interpreting concept, even if you have a great concept, you got to interpret it in a way that messages appropriately for the medium and makes good decisions on that interpretation. As opposed to somebody who's like, I'm out of my element. I can execute on what I see, but very quickly. But you're going to hit that stumbling block. Whereas a person it's like the tortoise and the hare. The tortoise is going to win the race, even if they're slower. They're still going to win. They're still going to beat you. Their portfolio is still going to be better than yours because you're all technique and workflow driven, and you're competing with somebody who's making good aesthetic choices and creating something that's compelling, messaging creatively and compelling story wise, than you, who has a bunch of technique where it's like, yeah, I'm glad you finished that thing in 4 hours. Doesn't look great. And this guy took 2 weeks, but it looks astounding. Who cares about 4 hours? You know, at the end of the day, especially when we're talking about portfolio. That's not to say ignore it. That's not to say like, well, okay, I'm just going to start with clay for everything. I mean, ideally you do. I wish I had a stronger fundamental design sense. So that's something I've been working on: anatomy, design, composition, color, form, volume, repetition, pattern, all that stuff that I've been kind of like, oops, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. In an embarrassing long time through my career. And I do. I think one thing you can do that'll kind of help that is start from a concept that's successful and being mindful of what is making this successful as I work on it. And if you can have, like, in the background, instead of listening to music and stuff, put on like a YouTube channel. Let me look up some right here. So here's.
Put on Mike's YouTube channel.
If you want technique, for sure. Let me see if I can find a couple for you. So we can have a little talk about this too. A couple of my
Well, I
favorite.
mean, you definitely, you know, have this literacy of aesthetics and design built up. I just, you know, always think it's important to talk about like how important that foundation is, that once you get to these tools, because you're making these decisions as you're also gaining all of this experience with the techniques and with the processes. So I think there's sometimes people think that a lot of this stuff is just driven by the application. It's like, well, we're still making the decisions.
Yeah, well, that's the thing too. So I would really strongly say everybody definitely take some time out and watch this Designing for Entertainment. This is all about intrinsic and extrinsic design and making. This goes back to like, hey, I'm making a fire hydrant. Who cares? You can make a chair an astounding experience, and he goes through and explains why that is. So this is a really good video to watch, and he talks a lot about intrinsic and extrinsic design. So if you can marry, and he does a lot of things like mind mapping. So if you can make, if you have intrinsic design and extrinsic design. So if you go through here and you're designing aesthetically, you can go down here to like Design Lab and be like, hey, how do you make a cool mech? And you can start with just pulling shapes and just volumes and just being like, hey, here's some cool, this thing reads nicely. Now, is it fully functional? Is the guy who's in there going to be able to urinate appropriately, or is it going to be fully ergonomic while he's in the mech? Maybe not, because it's not really relevant at this stage. However, if you have a good idea and a good knowledge of ergonomics and human functionality and machinery, and you can throw aesthetics at a page and still be keeping that on your back burner as you design, oh my God, that's that sweet spot. So it's not all driven by functionality, and it's not all driven by pure aesthetics, because even if you throw pure aesthetics at something and you show it to somebody, even somebody who's a layman, they're still going to look at it and go, that looks cool, but there's something bugging me about it. And they may not be able to point at it, but they're going to feel it. And then somebody who's knowledgeable can look at it and go, hey man, you put an iron bar over the knees. How the hell is that thing going to run? It's not going to be able to move. And the layman looks at it and goes, that looks really cool. I totally missed the bar, but I felt the bar. The guy who's looking at it, who's, does a lot of mech work, is going to be like, okay, this ain't going to rotate. That's going to hit. This is going to be a disaster animation wise or whatever. So if you can marry mind mapping and like, hey, you're going to build a ship or a level, again, where's the crew quarters? Where's the bathrooms at? Where's the fuel go for the ship? Where's the exhaust ports? All these things that have to go into something. If you put them in there and then design around it, everything falls into place and it feels good. And you can add aesthetics to that. No one's going to stop you. If you just go pure aesthetics and then try to build a level, you run into not to say that this is an example of that, but you may run into, oh crap, this storytelling isn't going to work in a situation or this level. It's going to fall real flat, real fast. And even if people run into the level, don't really notice it, they're going to feel it. So if you can marry those two things, boy, you're going to be a monster. And also like learning anatomy. If you want to do creature work and you don't know anatomy, oh, you're shooting yourself. So if you can be mindful of this concept I'm working on looks really cool. I'm listening to this in the background to learn about the fundamentals of design and form and volume and space and contrast and all that stuff. As I'm looking at this concept, as I'm executing on it, you can kind of be mindful of what you're working on. And then it's just going to exponentially help you, as opposed to here's a shape. I make the shape, bake the shape, put it in engine. That's all I learned. You'll learn technique. You'll learn execution. You're not going to learn aesthetics. You're not going to learn design. So you might as well do both if you can. And this is, again, do as I say, not as I do. I was pure execution. I was pure technique. I wish to God I could go back 25 years and be like, Mike, slow down. Learn this stuff.
Weren't you and I just talking about that? We wish we could learn all like 25 years ago to do all this.
Exactly. And luckily for you, everyone here, if you're just starting out, there's so many more resources. If you have a favorite artist, go to their ArtStation page, go to their Gumroad. Chances are they have like a $5 video telling you exactly how they do everything. Like, oh my God, if I had that when I was in college, I probably wouldn't have done much with it, but at least it was there. I want to say that it would have been amazing. Maybe, maybe not. But hey, man, at least it exists. Back in my day, I'm so old. We had a couple PDFs floating around and an animated GIF of Bay Ray modeling an ear. That was all I had.
That was funny because you were talking about design and Hasbro, that ZBrush link where they build the toys. They built the bathroom in the ship, the Mandalorian ship. Like designing, you guys got to watch this if you get the chance.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and link these two. So this is the first one. So if you're interested in here's another thing too that I get a lot is like, well, ZBrush is cool for sculpting, but you can't be precise with it. They literally build toys and sets and modular everything in ZBrush to the millimeter diameter. Like, sure, would I use ZBrush for like figuring out I need to make a bunch of 12-degree angles and blah, blah, blah? No. But can you do joints and positioning and millimeter thicknesses and, you know, different material types? So this first one that I linked is, he talks all about like, hey, here's the different types of plastic we use. We use cloth. He get this. It's like a very specific name for like if it's cloth versus if it's rubber versus if it's plastic versus if it's a different type of plastic. Here's the articulation joints that go in there with live Boolean. Here's how you go through and you clean up those joints and make it performant, or at least be able to be printable, and have your details show up, and you having to like determine the thicknesses of and the amounts of stuff, and also draft of things. Like you have to be able to pull it out of a mold and it can't have undercuts. So you take, you know, stuff like this and you just pull it straight back to the head, and, you know, also determining like, hey, depending on the scale, you know, so all this is what this goes through. And then going on steroids here. So here's an entire ship built in ZBrush. You know, and like John was saying, oh, here's all the weapons, again, all ZBrush models. And then you can go through and you can see all the different backpacks that they build, all the different little Han Solo carbonite dudes. And I'll be, you know, full disclosure, I don't have Disney Plus, so I've never seen an episode, but, you know, I'm sure everybody here knows what the hell's going on here. But then like John was saying, inside, here's the bathroom, here's the little pee spout, here's where you put your towels, and, you know, the drain. All that stuff's modeled. And then it's not just like, oh, that's cool in ZBrush. Cool story, bro. There it is. And it's all modular. You can pop this little top off and you can look in there. You can put your little guys in there that are all printed from, you know, ZBrush. It's all fully functional. And then on top of that, here's like a modular set. So just like in the movies, you know, when they were shooting the movies, they didn't build like 90 corridors and have everybody run down there. They built like 3, and then they shot the scene, moved the camera, rotated stuff around, did a little bit of set dressing, shot the scene, same 3 corridors over and over again. So you can actually build those corridors, print them out, or you can just buy it from them, stick them together, and then you can make your own infinite Death Star corridor. And then this Boba Fett helmet, again, it's full-sized helmet here. You know, here's the block out, and then you go through and refine it. And even on the inside, since it is going to be printed out and people are going to be wearing it, again, kind of that intrinsic design where it's like, or extrinsic design, where's the padding need to go? Where's the leather strapping to go? Where's the LEDs need to go? Where's the volume, like the mouth is going to talk and it's going to go through this channel and up out the speaker and stuff. All of that's designed in here, and then you 3D print it out and you put it on. There's LED lights in there, but he said it was out of batteries. But there's the helmet. Boom, put it on. There you go. So all sorts of cool stuff. And even beyond this one, there's like a robot one. Oh man. This is like the mind-blowing stuff.
Yeah, I had a problem. I couldn't post any links in the YouTube chat. Wouldn't let me.
Oh, okay. It might be a permissions thing. I'll post this here too. So this guy does a fully functional robot, and this is the kind of thing where it's like, hey, Fusion 360, you can go into McMaster Car, download those components. This is stuff I've done before too, but he's like, you know, servo motors and making sure you have the housing for those, and making sure that the materials printed is able to rotate and be muscle powered by those things. You know, there's a McMaster Car here, it is exploded, and then, you know, it all gets 3D printed, and or, you know, once it's 3D printed, you can go through and you can you know, send it to wherever and get it mold injected or something like this. But yeah, here's all the robots. You know, he has one that'll serve you drinks over here. So there's the Zbrush Robot, actually fully functional. You can actually use Alexa and you can talk to it, and it'll rotate around and all the servo motors kick off, and then it'll pour you a drink depending on what you ordered. So again, so many weird. This was a very 3D printed Zbrush Summit recently. But a lot of cool stuff. That's a little out there, but
No, thank you for that.
Yeah. Any questions from anybody? We do have one. I'm sure people would like to see you start modeling too. Any thoughts on how companies are going to adapt this time to the increased production costs in the new generation of PS5, UE5, RTX 3K, 4K, TV era.
Yeah, and that could be a lot of proceduralism too. If you can, you know, throw in like, hey, Houdini, I want this type of rock and I want it scattered here and I want it to have this type of texture, and it just boom, button press. We can already kind of do that. As far as like the resolution or the ability to kind of like in the PS5 where it's like, hey, I took a 30 million polygon mesh and threw it into Engine. There's caveats to that. You know, you can take a ZBrush model, put it in Engine, and make it performant. I'm sure it goes through a voxelization process. I'm sure it goes through a rebaking process to make it performant. You're not just going to put 30 million times 10 instance in there, probably. There's also the caveat of those aren't bones. You're not going to put a 30 million polygon model into Unreal Engine and expect for it to animate around and move, right? So environment stuff or just lighting and running through it, no problem. In collision, no problem. But as far as like, okay, it has to go on a bone and actually animate, and that goes into a different type of hardware thing. But I do think this industry, it's the coolest thing about this industry is always changing. The scariest thing about this industry is it's always changing. So there could be a day where people are like, hey, everything you thought you knew, or you think UVs are important, forget everything you knew about UVs. We could come upon that day where it's like, yeah, don't worry about UVs anymore. That's so 2020, you know? Or if everything's like a PTEX or voxel or whatever new technique or technology comes out that's like, hey, we can just run it on this type of processor, or maybe, or even, I don't know, scarier, it's already happening too. Instead of you going and getting a nice processor and putting it on next to your TV and playing a game, why wouldn't it, you know, once we have the infrastructure set up for this all over, and it's coming, is you just server-side rendering. So basically, there's no min spec anymore. Basically, you're playing the game on their servers, and their servers have 1 million graphics cards and 1 million hard drives, and nobody cares about your min spec, because all you're really doing is streaming what you're playing. So you're sending you're pinging data to their server, and it's telling it, hey, I just jumped, and it's giving you the graphics of you jumping. So really, all you need to play a video game at that point is a screen. You can play Crysis on whatever you want to, because there's no hardware involved. You're literally just streaming what you're playing. Companies like that because they own everything, and there's no more pirating, and you log in, and if they want to shut down a game, they just shut it down and then they're done with it. Or if they want to, you know, not worry about min spec or have to do like, oh, we have to ship all this hardware and put it in boxes and ship it somewhere, and that's a lot of money. But if they can just throw it on their server and they have a new game and you log in under your account and you start playing, and they can patch bugs immediately, and there's no infrastructure base there, and they can get money with that, then it's probably what they're going to do. And you could actually make the same argument for workstations too. There's no reason eventually that I would need to have Maya at my house. I would just log into the company's. There's actually a thing called like Project 47, is a little bit older.
Would they lose money on that though? Because they're not releasing, I mean, obviously they would gain money, but if they're not releasing new versions for people to buy anymore, and you just have one version that go to their servers, they would have to figure out other ways to get their profit.
If the entertainment industry is good at anything, it's figuring out ways to get profit. So I would imagine they would figure that out. And even on the workstation side, you can have, this is called Project 47. Like essentially you have 1,000 GPUs and 1,000 CPUs sitting in a box somewhere at your office. And if everybody's logged in and basically everybody's licenses are on there, all the company's data is on there, all the assets are on there, so they don't need to worry about security. They don't need to worry about, oh no, we lost everything because or somebody's machine went down. It's all stored here. So very secure. And also the cool thing about scalability, and the same thing when it comes to gaming, is if 1,000 people are logged in here, okay, you have your GPU, you have your CPU, you get your work done. If 7 people are logged in, you have access to the entire thing. It's not like you need to be like, hey, I need to turn on cloud and bake lighting for everybody's machine, and it goes out to their machines and distribute renders. It's all sitting right here. So you immediately have access to 1,000 graphics cards worth of power while you're working on your stuff, depending on how things scale and how much, how the resources scale. So if you want to do a punch off a quick render with 1,000 CPUs and 1,000 GPUs, okay, if 5 people are logged in, go for it.
Should I wait to upgrade my computer?
Yeah, so that's another thing on the horizon, maybe to keep an eyeball out for. That's like, we could eventually be just working. And it's same thing with companies too. Like if they don't have to send you a version of Photoshop and you just log into your Photoshop account and stream you using Photoshop on their server, they wouldn't say no to that.
So that's very promising future there.
We'll see how that shakes out. And
Yeah.
again, Skynet will take over, and then we'll all be part of the resistance. And we've all seen
Yeah.
those movies. So,
Anyone, I mean, Mike wants to start modeling, or do you guys have any questions? Patrick, I don't know if you had anything to interject. RIP to all artists without internet connection. We do actually have some student work that I don't know if you want to
sure, I can just go down the.
go through that. If anyone else, just smiley faces right now. Oh, and they're getting the links to YouTube now, so that's working.
Gotcha. Do I have a ZBrush window open? Yes, I do. That would explain it. Okay, I'll just go through here.
Yeah, it'd be cool to have show Mike in action what you're all about there. So this is actually one of my students. This is the one that had the drapery issues, and so Liam, if you're here, I think this is your model. Yeah.
Gotcha. Yeah, these are one of those. Yeah, depending on how this ends up going into engine and stuff, a lot of this could end up just being, hey, man, make it all quads, get it where it needs to go, and then a lot of the actual cloth will end up happening in engine, and that's more of a game art thing. If it's going to be like a presentation thing, one of the cool things about cloth is you can go through and basically you'd want to hit your pose before you do your drapering, because the cloth is so good at storytelling and body movement. After it's been posed, cloth is just basically going to hang here, right? You're going to hang it off here. But as soon as you put this thing in a pose, all of a sudden you're going to get wrinkles. Well, boy, what do they call it? And this is another thing too, is like, hey, learn how to sculpt cloth, even though you can use Marvelous Liner, even though you can use quick, draping things here. So if I just go through here and we just take this one here and let's do this. Let's say subtool U, and let's shoot you to the top here.
Yeah, I think he was in like a concept phase part of this too, just kind of.
Yeah, so I can take, let's do a quick mirror. Well, so one thing I tend to like, I'm just going to take this top piece off here. So when I want to sculpt, especially when I want to sculpt cloth, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick zero mesh half depth size down to 0, just get some nice even quads going. So when I'm sculpting cloth, I like to be able to work on volumes and forms first. And just like a sketch, you work on volumes and forms, and then you go in and you start detailing it up. It's not to say you need to do all types of cloth like that, because there's going to be, sorry, zero mesh half. When you're detailing out cloth, you don't want to start low and then go high, because you're going to have to redo that same seam 20 times, right? But just kind of dropping this down to something like this, and then even if you want to just see how this is going to look before you commit. Again, non-destructive is always good. You can go in here to dynamic. You can go ahead and say smooth this down for now, but you can turn on a little bit of skin thickness here, and you can actually say, you know what, the outside of the inside is what the skin thickness is going to be. And I can even go in here and I can do, you know what I'm going to do here real quick, just to make sure this works okay. Let's say Control Alt W, yoink. So here's his chest here, and we'll go ahead and say, let's dynamesh this. So, okay, so we got a body underneath there. So I can take this shirt and then I go in here to dynamics and I can say, okay, so gravity, we're going to head and turn off temporarily, because I just want to kind of form this to his body. And then we're going to go in here to contract in the X and Z direction, because Y is, assuming, yeah. So Y up, Z forward. So I want it to contract in the X and the Z direction. So front and back, side to side. And we'll turn this amount down just a little bit, and then we'll go ahead and calculate our collision volume, and then go ahead and kind of shrink this to his body. So that way, at least it's kind of form fitting to his body. Now you're going to see it's kind of off of his body a little bit. Let's go ahead and take this inflate down to like 0.5, recalculate. All right, that probably already happened. So that way we can kind of fit it to his body here. And then when we want to start doing cloth stuff, say we wanted to like tucked into his belt or something like that. This is where we can start going here. And again, forms and volumes first is something you can do in ZBrush or Marvelous Designer. As you start subdividing, you're going to get more resolution in here, and you can just go in here to like BCK brush cloth hook. You can start adding wrinkles in here. And in fact, if you want to like go through the middle here and then say, hey, give me some big wrinkles, you can go BTC transpose cloth, and you can kind of start adding wrinkles. Now, part of the problem is we don't have a ton of geometry here. So if I continue subdividing, I'll subdivide this 2 times here and then hit W and then say, let's go ahead and throw some wrinkles in here. You're going to see, okay, we're getting a little bit more high resolution wrinkles that I'm able to use transpose. And we actually have contract still turned on. So I'm going to go turn that off. In fact, let's turn on expand just a little bit. So as I'm pulling this down, it'll go ahead and start expanding out. So we can start developing some wrinkles. Now, the more I subdivide this, and you're going to need to watch this point count because you are going to run into a max simulation points, the finer the wrinkles are going to be. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my collision volume when I'm dealing with this.
There was that fasting that I was talking about earlier. That happened.
Oh, yeah, that collision volume, that's going to be, it's going to leap to the underlying collision volume. So once it's kind of next to his body, I go ahead and just turn that off. I don't need it sampling the collision volume anymore. Now that's not to say I can't go to surgeon level 1 and kind of shrink it to his body if I need to. But if I'm just putting in wrinkles, I can just do this. Now, as I'm subdividing, it's like, oh, okay, these wrinkles are getting smaller and more fine. That's not necessarily what I'm looking for. So what you can do instead is we'll just say, let's go back to surgeon level 3. And so now we're able to get nice big form wrinkles, but now it's faceted. Well, remember over here in dynamic, you can just turn this up to see what it would look like subdivided while still getting a little bit, more form wrinkles here. So, so this is where you can kind of go in here and say, okay, let's blur this out and just pop in some wrinkles here. And then we can, again, turn that smooth subdiv up to 2. So this is where you can kind of start just, okay, you had it tucked into his belt. You got some wrinkles in here. You can go through, turn off X-symmetry, and you can start pulling some of the stuff around. This might be, we set it in level 2 here to get some forms in here. So, and then again, you're always thinking about like, okay, as things drape, they're going to go from a tension point or like what's underneath, and it's just going to kind of hang, and then it's going to find another tension point. And then on the opposite side of that, you may have some, what do they call it? I actually have some brushes for this. Let's do this. Instead of just using dynamics, let's do stuff like this. I'm going to solo mode here. So I have some brushes. This is from, you probably know him, John. Pablo Munoz Gomez has a kind of a cloth sculpting set. And this was before dynamics even existed. But he has some cool brushes that are kind of for this type of thing.
He's not the one that created the orb brushes too, or is this?
This is a different one, but yeah, the Orbs Crack brush too. That's kind of like if you want to do stylized work, that's a good place to go to. But as far as like, just talking pure cloth and, okay, it's going to hang from a tension point, and it's going to kind of droop down is you don't have to use dynamics, or you can use dynamics as a volume starting point and then go through here. And you know what, just for fun, just so we can kind of explain this a little bit better, let's go in here and say, let's do this to here. Crinkle this up. So I had brush cloth turned on, so it actually did a little bit of that work for me. But again, you can use that as a starting point and kind of expound from there. So now we have cloth that's going to drape this way. So we'll go back up to level 3. So you got a tension point, and then it's going to kind of gather and collect in here. And there's brushes you can use for that. I mean, you can just literally go through here and kind of put compression wrinkles on one side and then long, smooth wrinkles on the opposite of that. Because again, it's going from tension point here. So now you're kind of telling that story of the cloth, and now on the top, you got compression wrinkles. There's also a brush you can kind of use for that, like X-fold. So you can just kind of just take this and kind of go back and forth. And is that great? No, but it's just to kind of break up the surface and kind of get you thinking about compression wrinkles. So now you can go in here with your standard brush or your inflate brush, and you can kind of go through here. And again, he's got a whole series on this. If you want to check out like fundamentals of cloth sculpting and stuff like that, you can do that. But again, it's all about that storytelling. And then on top of this too, if you want to go like brush cloth hook, maybe drop it down to sort of level 2, maybe turn on a little dynamic. You can go through here and be like, let's kind of pull this down a little bit. Let's tell that story of those wrinkles with a little dynamics. There's nothing wrong with that, so it's part of that. So that's kind of cloth storytelling. But I would say overall, it's a really cool model. I get a feel for what the character is. If you guys really want to go down the rabbit hole, I'll shoot you this link. You'll love me for this. A place called TV Tropes. And let's do this. Let's do. Like if you ever thought you had an original thought in your head, think again. You didn't. It's all been done, and in a good way. It's actually really interesting to go through here and be like, every single show, every single game, every single archetype that's ever been made, every single variation of that archetype that's ever been made has been made. I promise you. And that's not a bad thing, because you can actually learn a lot from what's been done and what messages appropriately to what audiences. So if you want to go through here and be like, hey, let's look at heroes. Well, what kind of hero are you talking about? There's several different types of heroes: action girl, amnesiac hero, the cape, the captain, cool uncle. Like oh my God, I remember, did you think you had a cool, unique idea for a hero? You didn't. It's all right here, I promise. Here's the Reformed Bully hero, and you can go through here, and it's all the different Reformed Bully heroes you've ever had, comic books, fan work, film, literature, all examples of these types of heroes. And even through here, redemption quest. You know, what's a redemption quest? Oh, your character is the cape that fell on bad times, and there's a whole section on what does falling on bad times mean as a trope, as a storytelling mechanism. It's all right here. You know, it's crazy. You could spend a lot of time going down the rabbit hole on this one. Rogue protagonist. So if you're ever looking for ideas or how to like message effectively, really good. Rogue, you know, fighter, mage, thief. These are all super archetypes, and, you know, different types of rogues for mecha games or puzzle games or role-playing or simulation or survival horror rogues examples, you know. So anyway.
This would be good for some of the classes. Someone was curious where you got those fold brushes.
That was, I'll see if I can, it's actually a little bit difficult to find. I'll link you to those characters here. And let me see if there's, and that's not to say you can't make your own fold brush. In fact, you know, not to dissuade you from that, but really, I mean, you can go in here to like, you know, Damien, your Damien's damn standard brush. Let me see, brush, reset all, oops. Yeah, so you can go in here to your Damien standard brush and get folds. You can go into your brush, the /3 part of this. Yeah, you can go to your /3 brush and, you know, get some decent folds. There's even a /2 brush that works pretty well. If you ever go in here like brush, Omino PQRS here. This one's actually pretty good for hair too. You know, but there's alternatives. You don't need these brushes necessarily. I mean, but it's, you know, if you want access to them,
Yeah, a lot of students forget about the depth or a gravity feature.
Yeah,
that helps too.
That's over here under, I think, brush depth gravity. You can turn that on so you can crank up that gravity strength as you're sculpting, and it'll kind of, you know, kind of pull down as you're doing your thing there. Clothing and drapery course. Yes, give it a second. This website's kind of slow. There we go. So yeah, so it's a whole course you can get, and the brushes come with this one. So, and again, this is before dynamics, so you can actually, you know, learn the basics. And just like I did here, brush, cloth. There's even a nudge in here, but I usually just do brush, cloth, hook. Just go through here and just kind of, again, turn off make sure you have maybe a little bit of expand turned on, so as you pull down, it'll go ahead and do its thing. But again, just kind of telling that story, depending on, you know, where that force is coming from and stuff like that. So I'll keep moving on here. Got a medical scanner from Dae-Yong Kim.
Is that one of your students, Patrick?
This was yeah, one of my students from the spring semester, and he embraced live Booleans with aplomb, shall we say. So I thought I'd drop that one in there.
Yeah.
Actually, since we're on live Boolean topic, there's a question from way in the beginning. Well, they were concerned their Boolean makes n-gons. I told them that's not the case. It's just triangles, and they were having trouble cleaning up Boolean operations. They were trouble doing the crease and remeshing their edges, and they still collapse.
Totally. Yeah. In fact, I can, by the way, it's a really cool model. So as far as like, I would definitely say check out Chi Vang. So here's one of his deals, and he goes through a lot of different techniques. And in fact, one of the most important things he does, and this is going to tie directly into that Z-remesher question, is when do you do Z-remesher and when do you start putting in detail? Because a lot of people will go through and detail to the max and then try to Z-remesher. And Z-remesher, maybe AI, machine learning, Skynet, all that stuff, maybe eventually we will get a Z-remesher that's just like, hey, do whatever you want, hit a button, it's done, you know, go spend your time elsewhere. That'll probably happen. But for now, I would say maybe change your workflow to be more like Chi Vang's. So, and he also uses a thing called Meshfusion, which we can talk about. So instead of punching in alphas, you use Meshfusion to go through and get you a much lighter weight, much more less destructive workflow. and actually just stay in the box modeling land as opposed to just, so here's an example of Meshfusion. Just instead of going through here and pulling in an alpha and having to subdivide your mesh up to 1 million polygons or 2 million or 5 million, just go through here and make a polygroup and then just use Meshfusion to get you that result. As well as when you're going through and ZRemeshing, instead of ZRemeshing after you've done all your details, you do the details last and you do ZRemeshing early while ZRemesher can make, let's move this, can make good decisions for you. So what I mean by that is if you want to go, I was going to link you guys to that too. Here's Zbrush Summit. So for example, if I go through here and I'm like, I got a cylinder here, edit, make polymesh 3D, and I'm going to go through and we're going to say, let's go ahead and crease and then turn on dynamic. So, and then in here, we're going to go into subtool. We're going to append a cube. Here, we're going to make this subtractive, turn on my Boolean, and yoink. There we go. Oops. Leave you alone. Move you up here. So this is, again, live Booleans. If you're not familiar with live Booleans, first of all, you're going to want to turn off
cloth transpose.
Or, yes, turn off cloth transpose. So when you scale it, it doesn't wrinkle on you. So here's live Booleans. You can go through here. You can do lots of really cool, zany stuff with live Booleans. And this is good for forms, especially if you want to go through later on and like ZRemesh it. So let's go ahead and say append a sphere here. And one thing, actually I did a whole live stream on this recently. So we have this here, we're going to make this subtractive. So if I'm going to ZRemesh something, it's probably going to be akin to this, because if I go through here, and in fact, let's do this. Let's take this up here because I'm going to show you something that'll be a little bit better demo wise. So here's this. Now I can go through here and you can do cool stuff like this. You can like BI brush insert. Nope. Wrong brush, sorry. BI brush insert Booleans, M, grab this one here and just kind of yoink. Boom, we got a live Boolean. And oh, I want it to be smoother, right? We'll just hit D for dynamic. And now you got a smoother result. So you can do this and you can just start, and in fact, if you don't like this one, you can just hit W and you can be like, I want this one, whatever you want, right? And then you can just punch this in, punch this out, whatever you want to do. But let's say if you're going to use something like this, instead of Booleaning this result, and you can go down here and you can say, okay, Boolean, dynamic subdiv, make Boolean mesh. It'll do it for you. Here's the resulting mesh. And then you try to ZRemesh this. It'll do an okay job, but as soon as it hits this, where it's like, oh, it's got a little thing punched in and it's got to follow this and it's got to make it nice and quads and these triangles. And then it's got to resolve over here to this curved surface. And again, AI machine learning, eventually maybe we'll get something like that. But what I would say instead, let's go ahead and delete that, is just your order of operations would change slightly. So instead of doing this, let's go to solo mode here. So we can pop this thing out of here, say delete hidden and unmask. So here, this is a little bit more doable. And one thing I would say is get those polarized caps away from your geo, because those are going to wreak havoc on your ZRemesher. So here we can see this is our ZRemesh result. And also don't do stuff like this. If I have a cylinder here and I say, okay, let's crease level of 1, smooth subdiv of 3, and oh, look at that beautiful fall off. It's really going to catch the light so nicely. Don't give ZRemesher something to think about there. Give it nice, precise edges to follow. So now if I go through here and say, dynamic subdivision, make a Boolean mesh, here's my U mesh. And now here, this is symmetrical across the X, but I just do a quick mirror and weld. And I don't even have poly groups for this top part, and that is going to be nasty, but I don't even have polygroups, but I can just quickly go through here and do like a groups by normals and find them, but it should be able to go through here and do like a ZRemesh, let's say half, detect edges for me, and then ZRemesher, and it'll go through and it'll do a pretty good job. You're not giving it too much to think about. In fact, you can just keep hitting half and be like, okay, it found my edges for me. It did a great job. And I can keep even stressing it and be like, how low can I go? Pretty dang low. Now at this point where it's like, well, I wish those things could now catch light, because look, if I go through here and I say, okay, let's turn on dynamic and then say, look how razor sharp those are. Well, here's where you can start doing like crease level 2, smooth subdiv of 3. And it's also, if you want to go through here and be like, you know what, I need to do a little poly modeling. I want to go through here and say inset polygroup all here. And then actually let's turn off, let's do student legacy here. Insert polygroup all and then like a Q mesh polygroup all here. You can go through here and you can put that in there. Then you just run a crease tolerance, turn on dynamic, you know, you have that all available to you. And in fact, if you wanted to do a bevel, now that you have all these polygroups built in there, there's a underneath crease here. You can go down here and you can say, hold down control and just pop a bevel in between all these. And you had to go crease some of those corners, but that's pretty easy. Now you may be thinking, well, I do want that detail on the bottom. I kind of wish you hadn't done that. It's totally doable still. In fact, if you want to rebuild this with like insert, oops, close, convex hole here, blink, W. I always like to do a quick, when I do that one, do a quick weld points just to make sure there's nothing squirrely going on in there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to say, let's do an inset, oops, inset polygroup island, and we'll just pull in a little comfortable border along here. I'm going to go in here. Let's go labeling out of edit mode, hit Control N, and I'm just going to steal. Let's hit
I just want to tell students, see the benefit of having your own marking menus and hotkeys, guys.
Oh, I live and die by this stuff. Like if you're ever going blind over here going like, why do I have to go down here to deformation and then go back up here to geometry?
So many menus.
I don't even know where it is. Geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. Man, boom. Deformation, geometry, modify topology. Now I'm a teacher and I'm doing this stuff and I'm teaching people. I have to go into deformation, mirror, and then deformation, modify topology, mirror, or geo. I'll say it, but boy, is it ever rotten. So I'm going to take this here, do Control Shift S to shrink, delete hidden, hit B, create insert mesh new. Now I have an insert mesh with a hole in the back. And what that's going to allow me to do is when I go back here, I can use this as a Meshfusion mesh. So we'll go back to our U mesh here that we zero meshed. And as long as I have a poly group here and something with a hole on the back, I can drag this out, control drag again, and it'll go ahead and fuse that geometry for me. So now if I go through here and do like crease PG, hit D for dynamic, I don't have to worry about zero meshing this or rebuilding this or getting nice topology. It's already done for me. And in fact, you can also hold down Alt if you wanted it to be like inverted here, and you can use move or whatever, and it'll go ahead and again, just crease PG, dynamic, and it's already kind of done for you. So, and again, and you don't have to subdivide this up to 3 million polygons, do an alpha stamp to get this result. And you can also go through here and change it. If you're ever like, you know what, I wasn't thrilled about this shape right here. Let's go through and say, Q mesh, polygroup all, pop this thing. Oh, let's do this. Sorry, group by normals, Shift D. There you go. So you should be able to like pop this up, and get rid of it. Or you can go through and collapse it if you want to. Or if you wanted to be like, I didn't want it to go straight down. I wanted to be like an inset polygroup island first, and then maybe Q mesh polygroup all, and then just hold down Shift to push along the surface normal here. And then again, just another crease PG, D for dynamic, if you wanted to modify that. But that's another reason why I really like things like Q mesher. So you can go through here and Q mesh this stuff out. If you want to delete something, you just like, Q mesh a single poly and you just pull it through. If you want to split, go insert single edge loop here, or we've one down the middle, multiple edge loops, bada bing, and then say like split a point here and then just tap to get the exact same thing. And then you can literally just Q mesh polygroup island and just pull it through, and it'll go ahead and do that for you. And then again, you want to crease it and then dynamic, crease it here. And then if it ever gives you, if we've ever done anything that destroyed this model for some reason, go down here to geometry, fix mesh. And I also, maybe just run a quick weld points again. There we go. So now you may need to go through here. Let's do this. Let's do crease tolerance up a little bit, uncrease all crease, and then crease level of 3, smooth it to 4. There we go. So now you kind of quickly achieve that.
So you can hear me right. So I always get questions like, okay, so now you're at this phase. What if you want to make a high res version and you want keep the low res and keep the silhouette? So I usually tell them make 2 copies. And then if you want to start damaging this, or you can take it to Substance Painter or do it here. But I have a copy for my low res. And then some people just completely destroy this, like go high res. They forget that they have to re-topologize. Like I would not want to re-topologize a hard surface object. So yeah. In that case, would you take it to like your workflow flow? Would you take it to Dynamesh, damage it up a little bit, save this as a backup for your low, and then maybe bring the Substance Painter?
I would basically, I would do pretty much exactly that. I would go through here. Let's go ahead and fix that mesh again. I don't know why it's got a weird edge in there somewhere. If this was my high res and I needed to make a game res, like you said, okay, I'd underscore high on this one, duplicate it off, and then I'm going to reduce this one to be my underscore low. And probably it would just be like, I want to maintain these spans for this nice curve I have here, and however many spans I want around here, and then just go through here and just collapse. I might not use ZBrush for this, depending on. I have some weird stuff going down there. Sorry about that. When I was pulling this stuff around, I had this was on the same poly group. So I was doing poly group all. That's why, man, do poly group island, keep your sanity. But yeah, keep this and then go through, and you can go through and be like, okay, let me plot all these points on this complex object if you want to. But since this is pretty clean anyways, going through and just deleting these spans. So if you had a duplicate of this, say insert single edge loop, and then just hold down Alt and go through here and just kind of do a really quick cleanup. Here it's going to get a little bit trickier because you need to maintain this curve, and this is all flat. So this is where you can go through here. And again, I don't know that I would necessarily use ZBrush for this, but you can maybe do collapse like poly loop after you do an edge. Oh boy, yeah, that's not great. So you maybe use another program to go through here and do a really quick cleanup pass, just maintaining things that change the shape. Now, to your point about like, you don't, in production, yeah, I would keep something factory fresh. And then if you want to do damage, I would say, let's go ahead and say duplicate this off. So again, like I said, duplicate this off for like a damage state, and then say, now this is just fake geometry. So if I have this and I'm like, let's damage this thing up. Bing, boom, bing. And it's like, wait, it's not doing anything. You have to go in here and apply that to make it real geometry. And in fact, you may have to hit subdivide one more time. So now you can go through here and you can use, mallet brushes or trim dynamic or trim smooth border. I'm going to turn this into a rock, but trim smooth border with a alpha stroke in here. You can go through here and really kind of like bing, blah, 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 blah. There's also the mallet brush, Elemento mallet. Here, maybe mallet fast too, and something kind of similar to that. But yeah, however you want to do this. Now, I would say if you're going to damage something as a damage state, damage the hell out of it. If you're going to go in there and damage it, and you're going to be like, okay, let me get my standard brush out here, and then turn lazy mouse off, tapping L, and be like, okay, I'm going to put a little crack in here, and then maybe here, and if it's going to be like this type of damage. Or, there's another thing too. We talked about orbs crack. If you want to do big orbs crack damage, or if you want to do stylized stuff, let me go to my orbs brushes real quick. Here's the orbs brush packs. If you want to do like, that's an insert brush, sorry. Here's a slash, ching, 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 big Warcrafty slashes. This guy works at Blizzard. So these are very old brushes, but they still hold up. Cracks and rubble, if you want to put in some stylized rubble. There you go, knock yourself out. And hey, look, it's a stylized asset now. So if you are going to do damage and really break the silhouette, then that's what I would do in this stage. If you're just going to do like little, I'm going to do, let's say BLA, go in here and maybe grab, circle alpha is probably fine. We don't even do store morph target. We just go through here and be like, I'm going to put some very light paint wear and edge scratches on this. Now I've got some paint wear. I would do that in Substance Painter. You're going to have a lot more control. It's going to look a lot better. You're going to have, it's going to be much more non-destructive because of the art director, or even in stitches. If you want to go through there and be like, use a stitch brush to drag stitches on here. And the art director goes, those are perfect. I just wish they were embedded a little bit less. You're going to have to redraw that stitch. As in, if you do it in Substance Painter, you can put it on a layer. You can give it height. If it's too high, drop the height down. If you want to change the color, you don't need to worry about baking off perfectly awesome material IDs. It's just a mask in Substance Painter. So if it's not going to break the silhouette, I would do a lot more of the work in Substance Painter, just to kind of, do that storytelling in a program where it's a little less destructive, a little bit more control. But again, if it's going to break the silhouette and you don't have access to like baking out to a displacement map, or you can do displacement maps in here. Let me pull this down here real quick. File. Sorry. Do it. So if I wanted to, and the making of this is on my YouTube channel too, if you want to just go through the process. I don't have everything up there, but making this mechanical part, it's all for free on my YouTube channel. So go.
I got this video and it's awesome. This collection, I bought this. So people, this Apinator.
but yeah, so like if I want to do, and again, you can drag on a smart material that has everything in there. But again, if you want to, you just make your own. This is the kind of program, again, if you want to just do like, okay, I want this to be paint and I want to make it a red paint. You don't sweat it, man. Here's your red paint. And if you want to have, oh, I want to model this paint a little bit, well, you just add a fill layer. And then on top of this, you can add a filter like a gradient here. And again, it's been a while since I've been in here, so I apologize here. So on this fill layer here, we can say, you know what, for this base color, we want to do a procedural, I don't know, black and white spots, sure. So this fill, you know, in fact, this fill, let's just have it affect the color. So this fill here, and then on these different black and white areas, we can say, you know what, for color 1, I want it to be red. And then for color 2, I want it to be red, but, you know, maybe a little different red, because this is, again, we're kind of going for a modeled look. And then in here, we can say, you know, kind of red, but maybe a little more orangey. So this is kind of a modeled red look as opposed to just a flat red. And again, it's all about storytelling. If you want it to be sun bleached, then just grab one of these masks in here that says smart mask. This, you know, takes the top down. And I think it even has one in here. Sorry, I gotta move this thing again. It's always in my way. I want to say there's one in here, or ground dirt. You can just flip that. It'll take your world normal information and, you know, basically do a projection straight down. But on top of here, if you're like, you know, I want to chip this down, instead of going through here into ZBrush and like going through here and doing a little bit of chipping, you can go through here and you can say, okay, let's add a black mask, and then go through here and say add a generator. And in that generator, I'm just going to do it really quick. Again, make your own smart materials here for sure, but we can invert this. So now we have, you know, worn edges. I want more worn edges. So, okay, let's wear it some more, or wear it less, or whatever you want to do. Now, don't be like me and be like, okay, I'm done. Because you can also go through here. You can add a fill layer on here. You can say, you know what, some of this edge wear doesn't make sense. On top of here, let me see, not a fill layer. You can add a fill layer too if you want to break it up even more, but we won't get into that. So add a paint layer. So we go in here to paint layer, we go in here to our brushes, and this is where you can, again, 80% done in 5 seconds. There's nothing wrong with that. And I would say that's great. But then when you get into storytelling stuff, if you can go through here and you can do, scratch is 5, I suppose. Now you can go there into the paint layer, and you can go through and you can add, or you can subtract. So you can go through here, you can hit X if you want to add a little bit of scratching. So in areas where it makes sense, where it would be more scratched, go for it. I don't know why my Wacom tablet is mapped oddly.
Michael, this is exactly what I tell students is how often in real life would you see something where the edges wear exactly the same length throughout the entire thing? And
they used to call it like you basically take apart the entire model at the seams, put it in a rock tumbler, and then put it back together. It's like, that's what it looks like, you know, back in here in these occluded areas. And if it's a good edge wear thing that you build, you can add in like, okay, I think it even has it in here, like ambient occlusion. And then where its ambient occlusion falls, there will be less edge wear. And again, it's still not going to get you 100%, but if it gets you 85% instead of 80, take it. But you still have to go in here and finesse it a little bit and tell that story. And then even on top of that, you know, if you want to do, you know, like, that's right. And this kind of goes back to the non-destructive nature of it. So if you wanted to go through here and we want to do, like I said, a little bit of acid rain or liquid stream, or you want to make it just kind of rain in your scene for a little while. And wherever it rains, it kind of leaves some streaks on here. But say, hey, you know what? Oh, I did those streaks in ZBrush, and now the art director wants more depth. No problem. You just go in here to this layer and say, okay, height down. Now it's going to etch in where those streaks are. You know, it's completely non-destructive. Same thing for, like I was saying, stitch patterns and stuff like that. You can just do it in here. As if it's not going to break the silhouette, you're golden. Or it's like, you know what, we don't really want this. I want this to be like soot. So we're going to go through here. And it's same thing with the paint, with materials and stuff. Oh, I want it metal, or I want it plastic, dielectric or plastic, dielectric or metallic. And go through here. And oh yeah, now we have charcoal here. So we've changed the properties, base color, and then the roughness, we're going to make it so it's not shiny. And then you can go in here with your burn, mask here. Let's kind of go through here and like wherever an exhaust port is, go through there and, you know.
So Mike, in a case like this for 3D printing, would this workflow be different? Because I mean, 3D printing it seems like a more destructive workflow.
Oh, I wish I had a better example. Good point.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, like, I mean, because I would bake in surface noise and all that stuff in ZBrush if I know I'm sending in a 3D printer.
One kind of roundabout thing you could try to do with streaming. Sorry, I'm just going to load up regular show guy. So say I want to 3D print something here, and so I'm going to 3D print this guy. He has no genes textures. Well, he has subdivision history, so hopefully I should be able to go in here very quickly and do like Z plugin, UV master, work on clone, and then it's going to drop it down to the lowest. When you're going to pose something, oh my God, always have subdivision history and always have polygroups. It makes your life so much easier. It's not symmetrical, but I do want to use polygroups. We're going to go ahead and unwrap this and then flatten it. So the cool thing about ZBrush too, so you say, okay, I mean, you can hit W, control tap these and oops, turn off X symmetry. So go through here and do whatever you need to these UVs here. Because again, this is actually just geometry, but you can treat it like, use all your geo tools to do whatever you want to your UVs. Say unflatten, copy UVs, go back here to our original, and we just say paste UVs. So now we have UVs on here. So now let's say I want to 3D print, and I need to get some detail on here. I want to 3D print. Well, going into Substance Painter, you could do the detail. You could try and export the height map as a displacement map and bring it in. Cross your fingers. That's a way to go about it. But if you are going to 3D print it, you can use, you have displacement maps in here. So you can go to surface noise. You can just load in, I mean, I'll do two different versions. We go in here to a weave here. So if you look at this weave up close here, we're going to say, pop that strength in. We're going to say mix basic noise down to 0. That plugin scale is going to drop dramatically. And you're going to see when I go to the side, oh, this is going to stretch down the side because it's a planar projection. You just, wherever you loaded this up, it's going to project straight back. If you turn on UVs, now it's going to use your UV map. And now when you go in the plugin scale, and let's go ahead and crank that strength here. It'll go ahead and wrap for you. Or you can go in here and just grab your own alphas. So if I go through here, ZBrush 21 alphas. And then that thing we were talking about earlier, it also comes with tiling cloth alphas. So if you want to go through here and say, give me denim, tiling denim through here. Now we can say strength, magnify, alpha, scale, turn off noise plug. And then expect this noise, alpha scale down. So here's kind of a denim on your object. So you can say, okay. And now you have denim noise. Now, if you're going to 3D print this is where you need to get your Z plugin scale master unit helper and make sure you're on the right units and stuff, because a lot of this detail or the thickness of it, the detail, depending on what you're doing, may or may not show up. So I'm actually going to edit this and we'll say, change that alpha scale quite a bit. And these UVs aren't great, but good enough for demonstration purposes. Another thing too, is you can go through here and you can say, okay, knock that strength down just a little bit. Now, if you make it too subtle, when you go to 3D print this, you always evaluate your object from like, okay, it's gonna be a 6-inch model. Well, look down and see if you can find, something comparable and see like, oh, that's only gonna be that big. So you make that big on your screen, you'll have a much better idea of how that's gonna read. So when I've seen successful 3D prints, what they'll do is they will, I'm gonna grab another alpha. This one's a little bit noisy. I'm just going to get something a little bit more.
There's a Spider-Man thing going on there.
Yeah. Let's see if that loaded up. There it goes. I just tapped it again. Sorry. Okay. And then we'll say this scale here. So if we do this scale with this resolution, if you're right up on it, like if you have that 6-inch thing, that 6-inch maquette thing you're going to print out and your eyeball is going to be this close to it, sure, it may show up if your printer can handle that kind of resolution. However, always remember, you're going to be viewing this thing from back here and probably your printer can't handle the resolution. So always be evaluating. Let's turn off our poly paint here, sorry. From back here. So what you may end up doing instead is going in here and saying, you know what, I'm going to over crank that strength by quite a bit. And then I'm also going to go in here and crank that scale up. It may even look dumb, but remember, as soon as you back it out and it reads a little bit better, it's going to look it's going to be just noise. It's going to be kind of gross noise if you don't make it overcranked. So I've seen some very successful 3D prints that have like, hey man, that stitch pattern on him would never be that big. But if you bake it that big and you overcrank how heavy it is, it'll actually help you. Now, this isn't actually applied to the mesh yet. If I turn this off, it's just a displacement map. So what you can do is, if you want full control, just go ahead and add a layer and a morph target. And then you can say, I wouldn't even apply to mesh. You can apply to mesh and it will apply to your geometry, assuming we were at the highest, which we should be. Yep. So there you go. But instead of doing that, what I might do, even for more control, and we're still recording, is say mask by noise. So that'll just go ahead and throw a noise in here, and then you can just dial in a deformation inflate amount. So you can just go through and inflate or deflate the perfect amount. And in fact, that noise, that masking is getting away, just go turn it off. And so once you've done that, you can say, okay, stop recording. And now you have total control over how much or how little, if you want it inverted, or if you want it even overcranked even more than one, you can just go in here and overcrank it even more. And then with your morph target, you can go through here and you can say BMO for your morph brush. And you can like, let's turn the text into here. You can morph out where you don't want it, or you can even switch and then morph in where you do want it. And you could also have applied the noise where you have it masked or unmasked. That's also another layer of control you can add to it, but that's part of that. Let's make a drink. Where my voice goes.
That's great.
But yeah, back to the hard surface model. I mean, this thing, like I said, okay, morph brush. Sign here. Very cool, you know? So as far as like what the functionality and what another useful thing too, especially if you're going to be like a prop modeler and stuff, is having a human for scale, because that'll really help you inform you like, do my bolt sizes make sense? You'd be surprised how many things that are like room sized that look cool. You put bolts on it and then you put a human for scale and you run around the level and the bolt is the size of your face, you know? And it's like, wow, that doesn't read so well. So then you got to have face weighted normals and floating decals and stuff like that. But yeah, human for scale and making sure that, you know, this thing reads as it's supposed to. And again, all the doing that mind mapping stuff, like where does this thing plug in? Where is its power source? What function does it have? What opens and what closes and stuff. So, but yeah, there's also some Alex Senechal has stuff that's like, hey, you know, make sure you follow, 70-30 and make sure you punch in stuff in the ways that make sense, and then complements the feature and, you know, where you put your rivets and bolts and how you cut things and how you emphasize lines and stuff. But yeah, I don't really have much as far as aesthetics. I think it looks really cool. But
I like those scribe lines on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's also, pretty non-destructive here too. So this is the one thing that Chi Vang does in his video as well, is just pulls in these type of things here and just uses it to kind of punch in those details.
I'm thinking back in before Booleans, like how would I make this stuff? Like I don't even know how I got things this decent before all these new tools.
Yeah, and those are getting better too. Like the Boolean and ZBrush, if you want to like have a transition between two Booleans, there's shader tricks you can do in Modo and Houdini that'll do like a smooth kind of transition that you can dial in, or even in Keyshot, you can actually take something that's two things put together or a very hard surface, and you can say, hey, give me a rounded edge shader, and it'll do it for you. And then you can bake that result out sometimes. I'm trying to remember the person who does that a lot. I forget his name. He's a Modo guy, but Torfrick, I think. That type of thing too. So as those tools get better, and as Boolean tools, and it's by tools getting better, it's like, hey, how do we resolve these surfaces? So somebody can go in, instead of hand remodeling sub-D surfaces and putting it in control loops and making sure it resolves correctly. Throw some Booleans at it, get what you need, and hit a button, or have the tool be smart enough to figure it out. So there's some really good tools now. Go ahead and say, oops, and say, I'll keep moving along here.
Oh yeah, this is the one I wanted to talk about. How can she 3D print this? And I said pretty much it's good. It just needs to be watertight. Maybe the cloth thicker.
Yeah, you would want to, depending on like, do you want to do it for, if you're just straight up 3D printing it, man, the world's your oyster. Like you said, John, make sure it's watertight, make sure there's nothing that's going to be physically impossible for the printer to achieve. Other than that, you're fine. If it comes to things like, oh, watch those Hasbro videos, and or even anything from the Zbrush Summit, where it's like, hey, if you want to make this, not if it has to be articulated, but if you wanted to, like, you know, chop an arm off and over here and maybe put a height of seam through here and print this out in pieces and stick it back together. Paul Gabriel's actually doing a 3D printing a gremlin model. And again, it's going to be 24 inches tall. So he's doing the leg and the ears and stuff. They all have key registrations. So there's videos on that too, like how to do key registration and do a little bit of shrink. So when you stick them together, it'll fit with each other within.
Yeah, I've been checking his out. That he's doing awesome work on that gremlin.
Yeah. I would say one thing you can kind of do in here, you can go in here to Z plugin. If you, not that this has any real problems with scale, but if you ever find out that like your brush is kind of capping right here, you can go into preferences, draw, and you can over crank it. You can crank up your mesh brush size, or even better, your dynamic brush scale, and that'll kind of do a multiplier effect. However, you can also go in here to scale master and say ZBrush scale unify, and it'll go through here and rescale all of your parts to be more ZBrush compliant. It's not going to change the scale of your object. Basically what it's doing is underneath here, if you go in here to size, it tries to put your bounding box at around 2, and that makes the ZBrush brushes and all the things that ZBrush does and behind the scenes in the math be compliant with your model. However, it is going to change this export value. So now it's going to export at 3 as opposed to whatever it was previously.
That'll also change your Dynamesh resolution results too, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. In fact, there's a Dynamesh master if you don't like dealing with like the vagueness that is resolution slider for Dynamesh, you can go over here and you can say, hey, you know what? Not Decimation Master, Dynamesh Master. Do I not have that? Dynamesh Utility, sorry. You can tell it how many polygons you want exactly. And then in here, you may have to use autoscaler if it doesn't quite hit that point. But yeah, as far as like how to 3D print this thing, I think you're golden. There may be some, if you want to maybe not have too much weird stuff happening through here. Let's do this. Let's say,
it's still a work in progress.
Yeah. You know what I love to use for this, just real quick. So let's shift D, polyframe transpose. So what I'll tend to do, I'll do like a BTO topology brush here, just for like straps and stuff, and just kind of really quickly, you don't even have to make a straight line. Just go through here and be like, okay, boom, there's my split mass points here. And then this could just be my little strap in here. And that'll just make this one, oops. Go ahead and pop this out of here. Here. Oh, there's 2 of them. So now I even have polygroups on here. So if I'm like, oh, I made it too thick. It's just a simple matter of like Q mesh, polygroup island, hold down shift and pull along those. If I even want to straighten these things out, I'll do is quick crease and then just do a polish by features open circle and just bloop, bloop, straighten those out just a little bit. Let's make that a little bit thinner. And again, going back to that storytelling, where this thing punches in, where this thing folds in here. And you don't have to spend a ton of time, because I know it can get tedious being like, well, I don't have to deal with all this. It just is a simple matter of, going through here, maybe let's do this. Let's say transpose, edge loop complete, tap W, pull this back, and then Control Alt yoink. And so if I want this to kind of fold over a little bit, I can even take this thing and, let's do this. Hold on just a second. Let's transpose edge here. Let's pull this out just a little bit. So now if I want this to like fold over, I can go through here and I can say Q mesh, a single poly, and just kind of pull this up and hold down Control. And then we'll just continue to pull this out. And then if I want to, I can say, you know what, let's delete here and here. And then we'll say bridge, 2 holes here and here. And then now, this kind of has a little folded over look, and then you can, BI brush insert. I don't know. Actually, I think there is a clothing thing in there. Yeah. Boom. Snap assembly. Yoink. Pull it in there. And again, this, you probably pull this back too. So again, be mindful of if you need to kind of pull this in here, if you need to add a little more resolution, so you can go in here and say insert single edge loop, and then, pull this back up. You totally can, just go through and do what you need to do. And if you want to grab that little snap assembly, you can hit W and Control tap that one. It's going to be on its own polygroup. And if it's easier, just split mass points. And now it's on its own subtool. So you can just go through and Alt tap through here. And even this thing, if you want to go through and say, Let's do uncrease all, up that crease tolerance, crease level of 2, smooth sensitive of 3. If this is more of like an army or an army kind of snap assembly, in fact, that's kind of bugging me, sorry. We don't even need this, delete hidden. Let's say insert single edge loop, Shift D, get rid of this one. We'll say insert multiple edge loops here. And then again, let's increase all W. I'm going to hold down Control and just pull along here. And then we'll just kind of pull that out there. Again, crease dynamic, crease level of 2. Or if we don't like these, we should be able to go through and say maybe do a cube mesh, a single poly. We can kind of back this off just a bit here. So now when we hit D for dynamic and we run our crease, that'll give us hard edges. However, you can also soften this up. We'll say crease edge, hold on Alt, and get rid of those. And if you want to, you say insert single edge loop or multiple edge loop. Let's keep the poly group here. And then we can say Control Alt W. We can pull this out just a little bit. So whatever look you're going for, again, just to kind of sell that storytelling functionality, just kind of adding a little bit there. But yeah, everything looks good. He's even got, I would even say kudos, on the stylized anatomy. It reads well. I don't see anything here that really bugs me that much. I think he's very, I know you're probably not going for cute, but I think he's got a very cute kind of look. He's
I told her to work on the 8-pack a little bit.
That's the thing too, is if you ever want to get into like scan data is awesome for like studying. So I think, learning anatomy and things like Proco and stuff, going to the pose selector, like if you want to get to, this type of thing too, you go through here and instead of using, and you can load up scan data, you can buy scan data from like 1024, whatever you want. But the ability to kind of go through here and see the body all in the round. And even if you want to like learn values and stuff, you can turn off textures, going to black and white. You can change the skin brightness here. You can learn about like, core shadows and, how shadows are cast and stuff like that. But even just as an anatomy reference and how the body changes depending on how the muscles move. That's a good reference. This is something I bring up on the live stream a lot too. This is called Anatomy 360, by the way. And then if you really want to dig deep on like origin and insertion, which is sometimes useful, you can go through here and you can say, you know what, get rid of all the nerve endings and guts. We're not making a zombie. I just want muscles and bones. And if you really want to study, like even the weirdo ones, like the serratus anterior, well, I kind of know what that means, but what does it really do? Go in here and dial back these muscles. You see, oh, serratus anterior connects right here along the ribs here, and then back on the inside of the scapula here. That's kind of neat, so all the different muscles and stuff you can just dial in there, and that'll help you. This is going to help you for surface anatomy and how to story tell, and that's really important. Most of my reference that I use is I go to like Jordu Shell and there's so many.
What was that, 40 Pose? Was that something you downloaded or is that online already?
That's a download from 1020. It's Anatomy 360. And if you want, he's really good. I have some stuff on him. And then, or if you're just like looking for reference, like how storytelling and flesh and how it works and hands, different types of hands and different musculature types. Because it's one thing just to do like 35-year-old white male, and that's every character you make who's semi-ripped. That's not, that gets real boring real fast, obviously. But when you're into storytelling and what age and what rot and what difference between females and males and different reptile references and stuff like that, to really sell. And even like, you don't, bodybuilders are one thing, but then there's also like the powerlifting bodies. If you go look up like Thor, half Thor, the Game of Thrones guy, he's not ripped, he's not shredded, he's not even that vascular. And that does message appropriately, but it also messages when you're like at a powerlifter body, strength and endurance.
Mountain, right?
Yeah, that guy who plays the mountain. but yeah, and that I'll pull up something else real quick here too. I'm also a digital hoarder, so I have let's see.
I always try to get people to focus on like fat pads and all stuff. Like not everybody in the world is gonna be super muscular. Like it's good to know anatomy, but it's good to learn the exomorph, or what do you call it? The
endomorph and exomorph, and
when you do the skin detail, or like the fatty.
Yeah, and it's like, and this is also great for like skin textures and like with the direction that wrinkles go. And also this is a sculpt. You put some hair on it, you carry it around, you get arrested. And he's really good, but it's also not boring. It's not like a hyper real, again, 35-year-old guy. It's really exciting, and he tells a lot of story with the expression and the textures and like you said, the different body types. So if we go through here, here's a muscular guy, but then there's also this guy, and then it's just continue down. Like, here's this guy says so much more than just a plain old dude. And like this guy too, you look at him and what these people had for breakfast, or what kind of breakfast they eat or don't eat, or how much coffee or cigarettes they smoke, because it's just like, oh my God, it's written. The storytelling is right there. It's written all over their face. And then, speaking of different body types, like,
It's awesome.
yeah. And this is hyper real treatment, but it's just, look at that. It speaks volumes.
The Coneheads had a kid or something.
Yeah. And he's even got a whole family here, kind of Hills Have Eyes. Eyes are also good. But yeah, way down here.
Shell.
Jordu Shell, Schell. There's like a whole family. And again, different,
Village of the Damned.
Yeah, different body types and weight distribution and wrinkles and where the blood pools and veins and building up skin tones and stuff like this. So yeah, just all sorts of different ways.
This is like the next Wrong Turn movie I can see. Like
yeah. So yeah, and even like this guy, like if you want to be a creature sculptor, if you learn anatomy, and here's the thing too, is like I used to teach anatomy. I've learned enough anatomy, but it's going to be a lifelong endeavor for me. You may be someone who's like a Frank Frazetta type, who someone tells him, "Hey, Frank, you need to study up on anatomy a little more," and he goes away for a weekend and then comes out and he's amazing at anatomy. Congratulations, I'm jealous. But for the rest of us, learning anatomy and applying anatomy is a lifelong endeavor. But once you do that, you can know where and how to break the rules and make it convincing to message to your audience appropriately. So even if you really push it quite a bit like this guy, or if you just go off the rails and you're doing stuff like, another guy you need to check out is, hold on. And this guy's prolific, and speaking of like presentation, sorry, I got so many windows open now, is Simon Lee, AKA Spider Zero. Shoot, I closed it. I'm going to pull up some of his stuff here, because this goes back to how much do you really need to put that much detail into your objects. And really it's not. If you can just indicate detail, it's like artists, and I'm going to PQRS Spider Zero. So for example, he's the master of fluid expression and motion and weight, and all that stuff. And like even the stuff that looks detailed from him is actually just indications of detail. But he does a lot. You're going to recognize some of this stuff here. But even like this, and he does stuff like this so fast. He's very expressive too. And it's all just indications of detail. But if you back off, you're like, oh yeah, I totally, like, this looks like it took years, when in fact it's actually just really quick indications of the appropriate amount of detail and indicating, functionality and stuff like that. And he's also got some really cool ideas, like bone extrusion fragments that are cracked and like stuff I would never even think
it's like
of.
God of War kind of stuff. Yeah.
And also like telling that story, he goes in there and he doesn't just make a front 3/4 A pose person. He goes in there and everything he does just screams personality. You really feel what's going for. I'm trying to find I guess I don't need to find anything specific, but yeah, if you want to
That's-
see.
That's going towards like Rob Bott and Rick Baker stuff. Like
Yep, yep.
John Carpenter's The Thing. Yeah.
Yeah, those the original practical effects things.
One of my top 10 favorite movies.
Here's another really good one.
That's
You know?
great.
And again, it's not just an A pose, it's filled with personality. So that's not to say that you can't model in an A pose, but then if you just take the extra time to go through here, and in fact, if this one has subdivision levels, I might be able to do it real quick. Doesn't have a bunch. You know what I could do? This one's a little bit high, although it's split up pretty good. I'm wondering if I can do a quick.
ZBrush.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to control tap this here. I'm just going to say zero mesh, depth size down quite a bit, and then target polygon count of 5 is fine. So what I'm trying to do is, like, I would say I want to pose this out. Again, if you're going to 3D print this, you're probably not going to print out a 3D print an A pose. Go in there and give them a little bit of personality. And again, I would exactly what you did here is how I would do it. I'm not saying don't do it, but what I am saying is, I didn't have extra. No, this will go a lot faster. Sorry. What I am saying is just taking a little bit of extra time, and I'll show you how fast it can be. I hope if I can get this to catch up here. There we go. So this is, again, okay, I lost all my detail, but since I store that place in history, I can now, sorry, I gotta move this again. Zoom, I swear.
You got muted, Mike.
There I go. Alt A is mute.
Is that what it is? I knew it.
Yep.
That's fine, too.
So I can go through here and do like a project history. Say no, and in fact, we'll just turn off all this. So then I can hit Control D and then project history, get my details back. No. And Control D, and you can project color. That's why it's always asking me if I want to project color here. So here I have all my details back, but I'm able to go down to subdivision history. So if everything in my scene has a decent amount of subdivision history, I can go through here and I can even make a Z-sphere rig and go through and pose this. Now, some of this doesn't, so it's going to be a little bit more difficult. But even if I don't want to use a Z-sphere rig, if I go through here and I can say transpose master, transpose mesh without a rig, I can just go into T-pose mesh. And now it went to the lowest subdivision level on him. Oh, you know what? I may have had. Yeah, I think I had 2 versions. Hold on.
We're learning this in our class in 2 weeks, guys.
Let's see here. I'm just gonna kill the visibility on that one here. There we go, and unselect them. So now, again, go to transpose mesh. That's going to drop everything to the lowest, and if everything has a subdivision history, it's going to be a lot easier to pose out. So now I can go through here. It's like, okay, I just want to grab him, and then say hold down Control, and say let's turn his head a little bit and bring everything else back. Oh, I missed everything that's on his head. No problem. Just mask it, and then invert that mask. Hit W. Let's go ahead and pose this. You can use the transpose. If you hit Y, you can go in here and you'll get the transpose line. But you can now go through here and its head, or first what you want to do probably is let's do this. Let's say Control Shift. Just because I want to bend him at the waist, I'm going to do Control Shift A, and then hold down Control. I'm going to mask maybe right through here, and then Control Tap to blur that, and then bring everything else back, and then invert that. So now I can go through here, and I can be like, you always want to kind of start from the core of the body. That's where kind of all of that kind of starts. So if I want to kind of do a little contrapposto pose with him, maybe drop that shoulder and raise that hip or whatever I want to do. And then I'll go through here. And if I get a clean line, I'm just having a hard time getting a clean line through here. But basically go through here, Control Tab, I want to blur that mask. And then now I can get a little bit easier reach for the rest of these, and then invert that and hit W. Now there is going to be like, you're going to see, I'm going to kind of stress that geometry a little bit. That's okay, because it's still low res. You can go through here and you can just do a little bit of cleanup work. And you might be saying, well, can I just do a rig? Sure, but doing a rig with skin sliding and muscle sim and corrective blend shapes is going to take you a lot longer than going in here, scooting stuff around. And then, in fact, on my the big muscle arm guy, the skeleton muscle arm guy, I go through that process as well. It's basically sculpting in corrective blend shapes for your pose. So, speaking of, we can go through here and we'll say really quickly, just kind of, Okay, I'm going to bend his arm. And again, I'm going to lose a lot of this elbow, right? It's going to turn to goo. That's okay. I can fix that. So if we're good with this, we'll say transpose the sub T. And you can actually put them in all layers, so it's even less destructive. But, save a copy of your A pose. And now you just need to go back through here and be like, you know what? Alt tap this one, go into our clay brush here, and you still have subdivision history on here. So you can like, oh, you know what? I'm going to work on the forms, the volumes. Let's drop it down a little bit. And also, you can do symmetrical sculpting on a pose mesh if it is symmetrical, but we'll go through here. And also when you have a bent arm, and if your hand, I can show you this real quick too. If your hand is towards you, your bicep's going to be doing something different than if your hand is away from you. And it's actually kind of important to kind of study that a little bit. So if we go in here and say, it's fine. Default X brush, and what brush do I have? That's perfect. So we'll do, you have an arm here and you have a bent arm and you want to be like, okay, I'm going to be flexing this arm. Well, if your arm is like this way and you got your pinky here and your thumbs on the other side, and you can actually do it. Like if you're ever wondering like, well, what does an arm do when I do that? Do it. Like roll your sleeve up, bend your arm, and then put your hand towards you or put your hand away from you, and you'll see your bicep go from this when it's toward you to this a little bit flatter when it's away from you. And then again, if you go through here and you turn your arm towards you, I'll go back here in our brush. It's like, okay, here's my arm towards me. Here's my thumb making a fist here. Now you're going to get a little peak in here and a little gap, and that makes all the difference when you're doing a little bit of that storytelling. You can fudge it and you can be like, yeah, I don't know. What does a bicep do? That perfect. Probably you'll get away with it. But if you,
I was gonna say, I put something in your drive for you, Anatomy of Arms. It's awesome.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. And that's again, as that's another thing too, that I see when you post somebody in an A pose and you get that flex of the, here's the tricep muscle, and then you got the ridge muscles and stuff like here, and then it goes down to the wrist. And there's another thing too you want to look out for is like, you don't do your marshmallow arms where it's like same. It's, on the legs, it's long curve, flat, short curve. On the inside of the leg, it's short curve. This comes around and that's your knee. And then it's actually curvier on the inside. It's flatter on the outside because of all the tendons. And then this is going to be the bend of that tibia. And this is going to be a little bit lower. So it's going to be higher, lower, higher, lower. And then on the opposite, on this side, it's going to be higher and then lower because there's your foot. And then the tibia side, the fibula actually drops a little bit lower. And that gives you, again, that language of the body is so much better when you know that than if you're just kind of guessing or you're not being observant. You're not really looking at the body and really being like, oh, actually, yeah, you're right. When this actually is higher and lower, if you're just like, I don't know, what does a leg do with this? And it's got calves and it's got a foot, this is really difficult to sell. But as soon as you go in here and be like, actually, it's going to be curved here and it's going to be flat here, you're going to have a calf that's going to be higher on the inside and it's going to be a little bit lower on the outside. And it's going to be a little, your ankles, and then actually your foot is going to be a little more weighted towards the inside because you look at a foot, there's the foot and then the big toe and then the little toes. So just think about that as you're kind of dialing in the feet. And next thing you know, it's like, oh, and the adductors too. So here's your, your rectus femoris and then your.
One teacher said, never make twin muscles, like opposite sides the same.
And that's the same thing here. The other cool thing is once I'll study anatomy, but like I want to do sci-fi armor. These fundamentals still apply. You don't do sci-fi arm or sci-fi floors like this. Don't do it. Break it up. And, and I'm using the leg as an example of like, what could make a more successful sci-fi design when you apply these exact same rules to sci-fi panels for floors. You'd be surprised how much of that translates as well. But yeah, so yeah, that's just little things.
Yeah, I put an image in there that shows the arm in different rotations. And it's really cool. I get it to my students.
Yeah, that's excellent. And yeah, in this thing too, just go through here and then this will give you more opportunity for storytelling too. If you really push the pose, which I didn't, you can really kind of go through here and you can play around with like, hey, oops, again, I thought I turned off. There you go. Play around with like, hey, this oblique is gonna, I mean, he's muscular, but his oblique, when you bend your body, is gonna kind of squish up, you know, and it's gonna, again, you're still gonna have your anterior is, what is this, anterior superior like crest and posterior, whatever, you know, this is gonna kind of bulge, and then this is gonna kind of stretch, you know, you go through here and you kind of smooth this out a little bit, maybe, you know, and he may think like, well, okay, yeah, what does it really do? But really, it makes a difference. It really makes you feel that weight in that character and sell that story. And again, it's a little exaggerated, but you get the idea. Oh, and another thing too, if you want to go through like BCK and be like, you know what, if you've got a lot of skin, maybe you can kind of add a little bit of, you know, skin here to kind of, you know, so drop that Z intensity down. So you can kind of use your dynamic tools to kind of, you know, fake, you know, a little skin, even on the eye bags. I will do that too sometimes, where if I'm like, nope. Intro sample files. Let's use this real quick. There we go. You know, this kind of type of thing too. And I'll have some more stuff to show about this later, but like eye bags like this, actually this will be a better demo. So delete all. Yeah, crap. Well, you can use inflate and dynamics for like eye bag stuff and have them kind of puff up and wrinkle and then kind of smooth a little bit and then go through there and kind of wrinkle that stuff up too. So, but yeah, all together, you know, I think I say this is nice, balanced, successful design. It's pretty classic, you know, so very cool. I would say this would be a really fun one for me to take on my, I'm partial to orcs and goblins and stuff. So this would be a very fun one for me to take on my live stream and just be like, let's just have fun with it, you know.
I'm sure she would love that too.
I'm gonna do it one week because I usually have a hard time figuring out what I really want to do. Although sometimes it'll happen like live stream, I'll start answering questions and then it's just 2 straight hours of answering questions. This is very cool. Like this, okay, yeah, this goes back to the silhouette too. So if you want to check out, I mean, by default, you'll have this open in ZBrush. I don't know why, but I just have it off. But here, you can turn on your thumbnail here. And so now you can constantly be evaluating the your silhouette as you go and making sure it reads. And this could be a little bit misleading when you're like, okay, I'm making an A pose and you don't know all the answers from the silhouette, but it sure is a good rule of thumb just to make sure, you know, you're getting a decent read as you go and you're getting a nice storytelling aspect of your silhouette. Because again, if you're in game and you're seeing a character and it's going to have materials and colors, you need strong shapes. And I think this thing has it in spades, you know, and it's got that super, you know, these are those Jenko jeans, you know, super heavyweight, big fat stone feet, you know, he just screams heavy, bottom heavy, you know. So a lot of really, really cool stuff on here. And, you know, also selling this idea too of, you know, as cloth kind of comes in. Actually, I think we still have our Magic Folds brush here. Again, I don't even need to rely on dynamics, but like, yeah, as you get compression wrinkles, as things kind of maybe sit on top of a surface, you know, and, you know, these long kind of folds through here. You get it. It's all in there, but yeah, but then again, you see, okay, it's also kind of fun to kind of come through here and see, sell that idea, or maybe just even a starting point, and then go through here and just kind of clean it up just a little bit here. It's a little heavy-handed on the standard brush, but.
So I want to make sure too, because we have like a less than a half hour left, that is I don't want to keep Mike's time. So if anyone has other questions, to make sure to get those in, so we're not going over his limit. So I mean, we do have another question here, Mike, if you're willing to answer.
Yeah.
It's a little long one. I don't know if he gets. It's the one if you have an armored soldier model with subdivision levels. I'm losing my voice here. If you have an armored soldier model with subdivision levels, but there's way too many different pieces, would you recommend retopologizing in 3D Coat or Maya so you'd have a low poly version with less pieces, or just separate the pieces and UV bake the normals from there? Yeah, this is a lot. Just wondering, because he's trying to texture animate a model. I was wondering the quickest way to go.
Totally, and it kind of depends on the functionality of the model. So like say it's got a lot of pieces. Well, if every single one of those pieces need to animate, sorry, man. Yeah, you're going to have to retopologize and UV every single one of those pieces. Or if it's a cinematic model, you may be more inclined to kind of do, you maybe UV all the different pieces just because you'll get a better read. But if it's for a game, absolutely. I'm trying to see if I have a an example of a, I'm sure I do. Let me see, Zbrush. Oh yeah, I definitely do. So let me see, intro. GDC now. This one's got enough detail, I think. So, like, take this helmet for example. Here. So, yeah, this is a complex helmet, right? Well, the first thing I'm going to do, let's turn it off because it bugs me, is figure out animation functionality. Because if it is going to animate out, like if this whole faceplate right here is going to end up like going, and it, you know, unscrews back here, and you got to make your sound effects here, but we could do like something like this.
Yeah, the Police Academy sound effects going on.
Yeah, the Michael Winslow. Might be dating myself, but you know, if this thing is going to rotate down and expose itself, you know, yeah, this is going to have to be its own separate piece. And in that case, I'd be like, you know what, let's go ahead and say split mass points. And then that's going to be split. And in fact, some of the stuff's going to have to bake separately just for functionality purposes. So if we go through here and be like, you know what, let's say Control Shift A, these things are going to bake better separately. So I'll go ahead and pop those out. So those are the decision-making process I'm going to go through, or different materials. Like these eyeballs are going to be glass. So I can't have them just hanging out in there. That's going to have to go through a different pipeline. So we're going to go ahead and split that out. So animation, functionality animation, materials, and then also possibly if you don't want to build it in, like I could technically go through and topologize over this and like carry that topology over the strap, but probably it's going to be a hell of a lot easier just to model the strap or do the low res separately. You know, all these lumps in here, maybe I can make us all one piece, but I still wouldn't have to model this into the head. Yeah, it's never going to animate. Yeah, I could probably do it, but just pick and choose your battles. So maybe do that separately. So now I'm kind of left with this. And if I look through here and I'm like, oh, whoops. Yeah, let's go ahead and say Control Shift and say split those off. So now again, I've gone through and done that pass and I'm like, everything else, you know, it's not going to animate. It is what it is. And the materials are fine. This I would just retopologize. So all of these pieces I would retopologize together and just bake that normal information to a single low res. So I'd have, and then now I've got, instead of going through here and being like, okay, I have to UV every single one little piece. No, I just basically have to do a low res for 1, 2, 3, 4 things. And this has a different material. And then on this one here, I do a low res for it and, you know, bake out my material IDs that I don't have on there. But actually, if you want to, I think I have this available. Oops. Not Sketchfab. I think I have this model available. Oh, it's on Substance Share. If you want it and you want to play around with it, you can go in here to tools here and nope, not tools, meshes, sorry. There she is. So GDC, I did that for GDC. Here, I'll copy it in here. You can just download her. It's very old. So this is like a bunch of OBJs instead of in a single FBX file, which is definitely what I do now. But once you do that, you know, let's go to my models here. Yeah, so you can go through Substance Painter, you can texture up. And the other cool thing about Substance Painter too is there's an option for file export. You can say export to Sketchfab. It'll go ahead and load it right into Sketchfab for you. You can go through here and you can just toss it in here, wait for those textures to load. And there you go. So now you've got, you know, your own version of her if that's your thing. And there's some other, speaking of like concept and ideation, like this is a couple day, and this is also very old. This is back when Substance Designer, this is like a Dedo model here. But again, if you look at it from back here, it's like, hey, that looks like a cyber demon. And it looks pretty hard surfacey, right? Like, okay, that's a finished model, give or take. As soon as you get in here, you're going to realize this is literally just Dynamesh digging in, Damien standard brush. There's nothing going on here. This is all just concept mesh stuff. This really needs to be figured out. That's just kind of a quick thing. This is a little bit better, but at the end of the day, again, I could throw this in a game after a day of sculpting or 2 days of sculpting. and boom, there he is. Go run around. How does he look? And then I can make the decision. Okay, do I want to go through here and put an actual mesh on here and go through and make these all sub Ds? And the other question you have to ask yourself, and there's going to be leads who are going to tell you, yeah, you're going to sub D model this whole damn thing, because that's what I did walking uphill twice every, there and back in the snow. In reality, though, if you're just going to end up baking it out and it's going to be a top 3/4 down view, then probably that concept sketch is plenty. I'm in the minority, but pick and choose your battles. Don't sub D, re-sub D everything if you're just going to be baking it out to a 512 map. That's not a great use of your time, unless you're doing it so that you have a library of nice sub D parts that you can kit bash together and have better use of later. Then absolutely knock yourself out. It makes a lot of sense. If it's just like a quick little thing and it's good enough, then it's good enough. Stop and move on. But yeah.
How long did you work on this model? Someone says.
This again, this was like maybe let's say 2 days to kind of go through, and this is all like H polish, Damien standard, trim dynamic, clay brush, a little bit of, I don't even know if I have this model anymore. He's so old, just a couple little brush techniques. And I don't even think he's a very nice model. I don't know that he's
I want to see him in like Doom.
Yeah, I mean, actually, this was very, very early previs for Doom. Before it came out, we worked a little bit on that game, but this is. Let's see here. I was on super early on the project, and then I wasn't on it for any, much longer than that. So this is again just kind of a little fun sketch thing more than anything. But yeah, a couple days just to kind of get him sculpted out and run him through. Probably, I may have actually game res this one now that I think about it, and then run him through the, pop into some spader, bake him. You don't have to bake in a marmoset if you don't want. If it's concept sculpt, throw it in Painter, bake by namespace, get a little bit cleaner bakes, and then just drop some materials on it, scratch them up, and call it a day. But again, this is old. This is like doo-doo.
Yeah, it's good. Still holds up today though.
Yeah, and there's. Some of this stuff is really fast. Like these are just live stream robot sculpts here, where like literally on my live stream, you can watch me just throw together a dumb little robot and then throw it like auto game resin, throw them into Painter, do a little bit of quick whatever to them. Same thing for this one, I think. But yeah, this is also photogrammetry. So I have a photogrammetry. Like if you want to just go, and this is like me just going outside with my phone and walking around a little garden statue there. So if you want to do like photogrammetry basics here, it's real easy to set up, and you don't need much. And there's a couple different ways to go about it. And then you can do scan, clean up, and reproject your textures. At the end of the day, you just get a very nice, so this is a couple minutes of me walking around taking pictures and then running it, processing it for 10 minutes. And then next thing you know, you got, nice little thing. So if you're interested in photogrammetry, it's super easy to get into. In fact, there's like, if you have an iPhone, there's apps you can download to just walk around with video and done, bing. So it couldn't be easier nowadays. Darn kids and their tools.
One student say, do you think you have a minute to go over his last character? Is there any feedback? It was the one after the goblin.
Let's see here.
The one with the lone scarf. I think that one. This one.
Yeah, let's take a look here. And again, a lot of this is going to be, I tend towards workflow, pipeline, technical application and stuff like that. When it gets into like, the feel and the flow and the messaging, I rely on I would love like getting a concept artist to kind of look at this and because I love when I make something and then I give it to a concept artist and they're like, oh, that's so cool. Let me fix it for you. I learned so much having that relationship with a concept artist as opposed to taking that's another thing too. Take a concept, be mindful of it and design. But also if you can, or if you know people, or if you go to work and stuff, see if you can build that relationship with that upstream department's concept art and art direction where you can be comfortable going, hey, I made this thing. What do you think of it? And you hand it off and they're like, oh man, that's totally cool. So what I would do is, and then they do a draw over and then you see like, oh, wow, that really helps message. And they're so full of cool ideas. Like I struggle, I have tons of reference and I'm like, okay, do I put a strap? Do I put a belt? Do I put a latch? I don't know, man. I don't know. And
And
then
you see all
I
these
get
people
caught
with
up.
like different kinds of clothes and belts and hooks, and it's like, how do they? What does
Yeah.
that look like underneath?
And it all goes back to the TV tropes. What are you messaging? What archetype are you trying to message? So that's how I would break down like just feedback. And that's kind of how they do it in their heads is, okay, what am I messaging with this? Is this pose? Speak to this. Is it, he's a little straight up and down. I might get yourself into a pose and be like, okay, and actually have somebody take a picture of you being like, okay, I got my weight planted. I got my arm up here, and then maybe kind of push it a little bit, maybe do a little contrapposto, throw one hip up and kind of lean a little more on one leg and put one shoulder up a little bit more, because that's going to give you a little bit more of that dynamic curve as opposed to, kind of this with a bent head and a bent arm. This is kind of what I would do for a demo really quickly. He's got a little lean back, which is cool. He's kind of like, yeah, I can feel this. But he is still very stagnant. Now, that's not to say that isn't on purpose, because when you do something that's straight down the middle and you have these massive bottom legs here, that is strength. You basically have a pyramid there, and there's nothing stronger than something with a base that fat and a top that skinny and it's straight up and down. Boy, that reads strength. So I'm not even saying like maybe you need to do contrapposto. I get it. I think this reads as you would expect. But just for everybody else, putting yourself in that pose and really seeing, if you put one leg in front of you or one leg behind you, does that help it or does it hurt it? That kind of thing there. So I would say, generally for most people, I would say, hey, you know what, get a little bit more of a weight distribution. But in your case, I think it kind of works. And everything else is really cool. It's like the stylized cloth here. It reads fine. A lot of people ask me, how do you do wraps on an arm? And I'm like, well, how I do wraps is slice, move them over, and then I got wraps, quote unquote. I don't sit there and like wrap up an arm. This a little bit reads as, slice. And I think because like this cloth, I do think like cloth will pick up details from underneath. You can actually use like projection to kind of do a kind of a thin cloth look over another object. But in this case in particular, what I think would be more likely to happen with this is, you're going to have tension points. So this is getting tension from here where it's kind of wrapping around and kind of pulling maybe a little bit. And then let's go back in here. I have a feeling this cloth would be a little bit more like this, kind of pulling from that tension point and picking up, it wouldn't necessarily be picking up a whole bunch of detail from this one. So I think these would be more likely, actually, let's up that resolution a little bit. These would be more likely to kind of be pulling from this tension point to wrapping around the arm, as opposed to kind of following. And in this, this kind of does kind of come from underneath here. Yeah, these just look a little contrived to me. If I was to go through here, I might be like, you know what, these would kind of, these would kind of puddle. There's nothing telling me when lines go straight like this, there better be like a nail in there telling that cloth, hey, you need to be, pulling to that point. If there's just a line across this cloth, it just looks a little bit like, well, what's causing that tension? In reality, there probably wouldn't be. This tension would actually, oops, sorry, don't have a hotkey for this one, but this tension would probably be more like this, Same thing with this one. You're always looking for those dynamic, those tension relationships, like what's causing the cloth to do that, and then it'll start feeling a little bit better. But you can still do it stylized. I'm not saying you need to lose that chiseled feel, but just telling a little bit of a more realistic story with where pieces are tension, and then where they have where things pull, and then where they drape. I help that a little bit more. But yeah, other than that, man, this is cool. I like this a lot. Love those shoes, man. I can hear this guy walking around. Good luck sneaking up on somebody. And that's another thing too, is messaging this guy. He's not going to be a stealthy little ninja guy with feet like that, right? So hopefully, now if the idea behind him is, oh, he's actually supposed to be a stealthy ninja guy who flies through the trees, I'd pick a different design. Now, if he's a super powerful guy who's just he can walk across the bottom of the ocean, nailed it. Kind of like when Mario gets his little iron boots, klung, 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 klung. you know, you can walk up the side of a wall with these things, then yeah, totally. But yeah, this hair, I mean, this hair you could probably kind of, this cloth is very dynamic and stuff, and the hair just, it reads a little bit like kind of just sprouts. So you could probably kind of mimic this a little bit, get a little bit more helixing. Even, I'm not even sure like if it's supposed to be like more of a dreadlock type of look and stuff, but even like helixing the hair and also giving it a little bit more. This is also something you could try to do for, okay, fine. Just gonna really quickly split mask points in here and say yoink here. So if you want to, you can start like this, and then you can go, yeah, that'll be fine. So I'm going to go through here and I'm going to say bend curve, and we're going to put it down the correct axis and give us a little bit more points. Maybe not that many. So now I can go through, a little more than that. Come on. Okay. So now we can go through here and go, okay, we got some hair, and it's wanted to kind of fall and maybe rise and maybe come down a little bit like so. So now I've got hair, and you know, always evaluate it in the round. It's like, you know, let's kind of pop that out a little bit. So now you've got some hair, and then you can also go through in each one of these points, and you can start scaling it down. So it's like, I want to scale here, and then maybe kind of fatten up here, maybe, or you can also, or you can go through here and you can start twisting. So you can start getting a little helix in there. And you can use these as control curves too. So we go through here and we say, you know what, let's kind of fatten this up a little bit here, and then. So we have our hair here. And if it's like, okay, that's cool, but I want to use these as control curves for other stylized hair that I want to use. And then here we can just go through here. Let's do a quick group by normals, pop all those caps, delete hidden, and then we'll say polygroup, polyloop. And in fact, you can just box model your way through here. If you just want to like do a panel loops on these, would be easy enough. And by that, I mean just literally going in here to edge loop, panel loops, turn off polish, throw up a little bit of thickness, and boom, there you go. You got some panel loops. Let's go ahead and do a elevation, drop that thickness just a tiny bit. You know, so you've got some hair in here. But if you wanted to use these, you can also go in here to like stroke, frame your polygroup mesh. And then if you had like a stylized, I guess we could make one real quick. Here, edit, oops, initialize Q cube. W, scale it out, say insert, multiple edge loops, hold down Alt, and then boom, boom, and Control Shift, Control W, Control W. You know what, let's do this. Let's say rotate 45 degrees, brush, create insert mesh, new, stroke, curve mode. You know what, we can actually do this too. We can say intensity and size curve fall if we want to go from thick to thicker to thinner. And then down here underneath our brush modifiers here, we're going to say weld points, maybe a little bit of stretch, tripart curves, and then curve brush here. So now we can have our own kind of like stylized hairbrush here. And in fact, if you want to, let's do this here. If you want to have a max bend angle, you can actually use like a tentacle for this. If you want to curve this in, if you crank this up to 90, you'll be able to get a lot more curve out of your mesh. If you crank it down to 0, then it's going to behave a little bit more like a road, or it won't be able to bend in on itself that much. You can kind of, you know, use that, but we'll go ahead and keep it at 45. And again, if you like this brush, you can go in here and say brush, hold on Alt, select icon, save as, throw this right into ZBrush 2021, ZBrushes, hair, stylized hair. So now if you ever need it again, it's right here underneath brush, hair. There you go, stylized hair, just load it up. And then when we go back to our working thing here, we can use this now to kind of go through here and just kind of replace these curves with our, again, thin to thick to thin. And you can use depth here if you want to kind of drop those in just a little bit here. And then now once you've done that, go back in here to stroke. Stroke, what, delete curves, and then we'll go ahead and say, you know, it's hide point, control shift drag, visibility, high point, delete hidden, and then we can go through here and just do a quick auto group. So now, oh, you know what, maybe weld didn't work so well. That's okay, we'll fix it. Oh, you know what? I might have messed that up, but you get the idea. It's pretty easy. So we'll say weld and then auto groups. There we go. So now, in fact, you don't even need to do that. You could go through here and do brush modifiers, auto masking, topological if you want. You want to ignore the groups and you just kind of go through here and just kind of do what you need to do on here. And then you can also do like a crease level of 1, smooth subdiv of, come on, geometry.
Yeah, I see this method done so many times. I try it and then I forget it a week later. It's just like Harris is not the funnest part of modeling.
Yeah, and it can be tedious for sure, but you know, you can see how quickly, and you know, it may be too much or too little, or hell, even if you want to just be like, you know what, I like this, but I want to do 3D printer, I want a Dynamesh hair version of this. Let's go ahead and just hit apply. So now we can go through here and just say, yeah, go ahead and Dynamesh that result, and then just go and sculpt on it. So.
Now we are down to the last 5 minutes though, so I don't know. We're gonna have to wrap it up though, because we don't want to keep you longer.
Fair enough. I mean, hopefully with all the links I've given you and the resources you have available, you'll be able to keep you guys busy for a little bit.
Oh, this is great. Thank you so much for doing this. And I think a lot of students are loving it.
I was going to say, Michael, on a different level, what you just did, I sometimes show students how to do like a rope bridge.
Yeah.
Basically like a tripart brush and just saving those strokes off of there.
And that's so much faster than, I mean, there's manual ways you can do that, but man, if you can figure out a nice brush to use and then you just use curve helper or anything like that, just go plot, 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 bloop, done. Things go a little bit faster.
Someone asked if you had to do characters in Maya or 3D Max anymore, and I'm thinking you probably don't, right?
It kind of depends on what you're making, and if you're really comfortable, this is really cool too. This is another project Nathaniel's project.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that's one of our students.
So yeah, this is Nathaniel Goldbernson, and Nathaniel just notified me he's in my high resolution asset class, and he just make sure I got this.
It's like the coronavirus.
He got hired. He did an internship and he got hired, and he's starting in January in Orlando.
Oh yeah. Good for him.
Iron Galaxy.
Nice. I used to work in Orlando at EA Tiburon, man. Probably right down the road. It's get ready for that back sweat.
Yep.
Year-round back sweat. Walk out to your car because you forgot your keys. Back sweat.
But he.
Yeah, it's great.
That's really nice. And when it gets back to props again, it's all about that scale. You know, I always assume I'm human scale, so I kind of put myself in here, just making sure all the details and stuff. But it looks great, man. And this reminds me of in Halo, one of the Halo games. There's a floating weird creature in one of the tubes in one of the levels. I forget what, but I did that creature. So if you ever walk past that level, that's what's in there. I don't know that it makes a whole lot of sense, but there he is.
Was Nathan's model game resed?
Looks like it. We can peek in on it if I remember how. That's under the materials, isn't it? We can take a look at his.
Yeah, I didn't know there was a hotkey for wireframe in this program.
You know, I'm sure there is, and I totally don't know what it is.
I tried everything, and
I always forget where it is too. There we go. Yeah, this is pretty. It's pretty frugal, man. Definitely. Nice and clean, nice clean bakes.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Yep, and that's another thing too, is like there's going to be face weighted, like depending on the size of the object, you can get into face weighted normals and then floating decals, and putting more to get things perform in an engine. You're going to do a lot more because geometry is pretty cheap compared to texture, so you're going to put a lot more. You go in and you actually model those bevels now, depending on the scale of the object, and then you'll put your layered materials in there to tile materials in the engine from your material library. And then you'll put little floating decals for like the little rivets and stuff. So you don't have to bake out an 8K texture because those are really expensive. So basically you model in, you spend maybe 10,000 more polygons to get the right shapes and the right read, but you throw, 1024 maps on the thing and you tile a couple materials through it and it looks like you could rub your face on it. And it's like, whoa, this thing is so high res. When in reality, it's a couple cheap masks, they'll throw some cheap geometry for the GPU to chew up while you're playing the game. And then you're in good shape. So keep an eyeball. I think it's, I forget the game that did it a lot. They do a lot of spaceships, but yeah, face weighted normal type stuff. I'm not an environment artist, but.
Well, it's all great stuff. Yeah, but I think, well, it's 9 o'clock now here, 6 o'clock, and so many time zones. 8 o'clock where you are now. Yeah.
It's the end of the webinar somewhere.
Yeah, we should. Yeah, we should wrap up. He's already put 3 hours in this time for us. I know Mike can probably keep on going too. I mean, I technically could, but
this is fun. Again, thanks for having me. I always have a blast kind of just talking shop and throwing my 2 cents out there again, but just keep in mind that this is my 2 cents. There's going to be a lot of people with a lot of different opinions than mine. I tend to be a little hyper opinionated in some areas. So,
you got people saying they could listen all day and night. Yeah. I mean, well, you know what? Why don't, maybe Michael, you can talk about your live streams you do to the students and when you do them.
Yeah.
Might even see me on there sometimes.
Exactly. And so, yeah, it was always nice to see John, you pop up in the chat here.
Yeah, he even did stuff for my game. It was awesome.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. So in fact, on my YouTube channel, I have a Twitch channel, Pav Mike, and then I have my YouTube channel. So usually the first Thursday of every month, I'll stream on my channel. The first Tuesday of every month, I'll stream on Pixelogic's channel. I can link you guys to this stuff. And that's where, like, if I'm ever heads down and I'm like, hey, I want to work on something in particular, then I may not answer as many questions, although I try to. And then if I'm just in a mood where it's like, I don't know what I'm doing, what do you guys want me to do? And then I'll just start answering questions. So depending on the day, I may be doing mega question modes. But at the same time, if you want to see, I guess, all these live streams here, again, here's the playlist. And then if you just scroll down to live stream full episodes, just go through here and you can go through. Again, if you see something that catches your eye, and even if you do a search for, like, I don't know, I want to see anatomy, you've got like 5 anatomy focused live streams you can go check out if you want to. I'll link you to that too. So that'll be, if it's useful for you. If not, no big deal. There's a lot of really good people out there that do a lot of specialized stuff and way better stuff than I do.
Well, I'll tell everyone that I found it useful last 10 years. So he does some good stuff, guys. And you always learn something from Mike. He's one of the more thorough artists out there.
I'm always trying to learn. I know I try to keep a little more heads up development, but I'm also trying to get better at, like, intrinsic design, anatomy, fundamentals of character design. What's a successful aesthetic? So always be doing that too, but you guys did great. Like, every single thing I opened was really cool. So excellent job on that front.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. Yeah, maybe we can maybe get you back next year or something. Like, I don't know. We don't want you to be a stranger,
Yeah, for sure. You know where I am at, so.
Yeah, that's true.
Go through those links, see if anything catches your eyeball. Watch the videos if you want, or just do a quick search for anything that you might be interested in. And if I have something, I do. If I don't, it's out there. So cool. Yeah, thanks for having me, everybody.
Yep.
Thank you again for your time, Michael.
Absolutely. More than happy.
Yep. How do we wrap this up?
Yeah, I'm not sure if I should. I guess I can stop sharing.
I think we need Judy.
All right. Well, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Did you get all that, Judy?
I did. I'm gonna go stop the recording now and stop our YouTube stream.
These conversations tend to resemble like being dropped off on an alien world or something.